Chapter 99. The three of us maintained our speed as we flew past Fredenberg. The place was now in ruins, and many undead were stationed there. Dark clouds covered the sky. Perhaps the undead didn't like sunlight, so the undead witch king had used magic to change the weather. When we arrived at the Red Moon Lake, we decided to take a break. After all, it was my first time flying, so I wasn't very familiar with it. The fairy dragon, whose body was sparkling and translucent, also returned to the magical space to rest temporarily. The five of us found a big tree and ate some food under it. I thought it would be great if I could eat the fresh and hot food that Kelvin had cooked. We ate some food and rested for a while. Then, we discussed the battle plan against the undead Witch King. We hadn't found any traces of the undead in the Red Moon Lake, but the atmosphere was too gloomy. We decided to head to the undead Witch King's lair as soon as possible. The steam rising from the lake had turned into a thick fog. Suddenly, the surface of the lake rolled as if something was about to come out of the water. We had already planned to leave, so when we saw this scene, we immediately set off. We split into 3 groups and tried our best to escape the Red Moon Lake. That was close. What was that? I asked Yin Long's soul in my body. Little rascal, it could be a water monster from the lake. However, it might have mutated. If you fight it head-on, you won't be its match. I'm really curious what kind of water monster it is. I was curious about the thing in the lake. You'll have a chance to know in the future. Even if you don't know, what can you do? You should know that the guy you're dealing with now is much stronger than that water monster. I haven't appeared for a long time. Did you miss me? The Belgrave, Flamarya asked. I do miss you, but you didn't appear. I thought you disappeared. I didn't dare to ask. There were a few times when I wanted to use the Dragon Soul power to release powerful draconic magic, but I couldn't do it. Actually, I was a little dissatisfied with the disappearance of Yin Long's soul. Haha, little rascal, you are me and I am you. The reason why you felt me disappear was because the Dragon Soul power I gave you is sealed. Only when your strength reaches a certain level can your soul fuse with mine. You are too weak now, so I had no choice but to appear and help you. In the future, you will know more things. Take your time, Yin Long said to me meaningfully. As we talked, the 5 of us crossed the majestic Sevis Falls and finally arrived at the root of it all, the Mountains of Death. The Death Mountain Range was a boundless black forest. Almost all of the trees were withered and lifeless. The ground reeked of sulfur, and steam and thick fog rose from the ground. We landed at the border between the forest and the mountain range. We couldn't fly over directly. Yin Long told me that there was a magic barrier here. From now on, we could only sneak into the depths of the Death Mountain Range. I returned to my human form, and Avina recalled the fairy dragon. She was already very powerful to be able to summon the fairy dragon for such a long time. The 5 of us carefully explored the area and prepared to head to the lair of the undead Witch King. We groped our way forward in the thick fog. Suddenly, I saw a little girl not far away. This reminded me of the little girl I saw outside the cave when I rescued Avina. What was going on? When I asked Avina what happened, she said she didn't remember what happened. As for what was in the cave and where the cave was, I didn't know. Lofis was in charge of scouting ahead. He was good at hiding and scouting the surroundings. After searching for a long time, we found that we had returned to the original place. It seemed that we were lost. Getting lost in such a scary place made our scalps tingle. That was because we heard a woman crying, laughing, and some ghostly voices all around us. We were disoriented and couldn't find the way to the undead Witch King's lair. We started to feel thirsty and hungry, and we started to hallucinate. I started to sweat because the air made me uncomfortable. Moreover, I suddenly saw the little girl's figure flash by. It seemed that only I could see it. The others said that they didn't notice it. I asked Yin Long what to do, but Yin Long didn't answer me. He always left me alone to deal with and make decisions. I really hoped that Yin Long could help me at this time. This time, I followed and asked the others to follow me. The little girl's figure appeared and disappeared. I didn't know how long we followed, but the little girl's figure disappeared in front of us. Suddenly, a golden-haired little girl wearing a white dress appeared in front of me. She was holding a doll. I couldn't see her face because she was facing away from us. All of a sudden, she turned around. I didn't have time to see her face before she screamed and disappeared. The thick fog scattered. Not far from us, there were many black crows' nests. Those nests surrounded us. At this moment, some black crows flew out of those disgusting, filthy nests made of rotten meat. Those nests looked like giant meat sacks. There were hundreds of them. After some cawing, countless black crows flew out of the nests and hovered in the sky. "This isn't good. Run," Flance said to us. We quickly ran toward the mountain. Those black crows shot toward us like sharp swords. We were like headless flies as we ran for our lives in a futile attempt to avoid the thousands of black crows' attacks. These black crows were too terrifying. Fran had seen with his own eyes that these things could drill into a person's eyes. After eating them, they would drill out from the back of the head. Fortunately, we saw a cave not far from us. Without thinking, we immediately jumped into it to avoid the attacks of so many black crows. The five of us rushed into the cave. Natalia and I brought up the rear. Lofi's lit a torch in the cave. Natalia and I used the fire magic, Flame Blast. I tried to use the draconic magic, Yanlong's Dragon Breath. I couldn't use the power of Dragon Breath yet. It was only a little stronger than Natalia's Flame Blast. Just like that, we resisted the first wave of black crows that wanted to eat us. After that, the black crows saw that we weren't weak, and they seemed to be afraid of the cave. They didn't come in and just hovered in the sky. Thus, we took advantage of the narrow cave entrance and successfully resisted the attack of the black crows. Suddenly, Avina said. She remembered that she had been to this cave before. Chapter 100. Natalia and I turned around. We had been to this cave before. This was the cave where Natalia and I had found Avina. However, we didn't have enough time to search this cave. Now that we were here, there were many black crows waiting for us at the entrance. The five of us decided to search the cave to see if there was another way out. After walking for a short distance, we saw the wooden stake that Avina had been tied up on. Yes, this was the place. Walking along the entrance of the cave, there was actually a passageway. The key problem was that there were actually traces of man-made carvings here. This was a man-made natural cave. The deeper they went, the wider the passageway became. Not only that, there were torches on the walls along the way. With the light from the torch in Lofi's hand, we went deeper into the cave. Suddenly, it became clear. Not only were there bridges and flowing water, but there were also some ruins. It looked like a small town in the cave. However, no one lived here. It was as quiet as death. We saw that the water was flowing, and we were thirsty. Moreover, the water was clear. I held the water in my hands and drank. The water was sweet, so it shouldn't be poisonous. Seeing that I was fine, we all came to drink. After quenching our thirst, we ate something and rested for a while. Then, we continued to explore the huge cave. As we walked, Natalia said that her stomach hurt. Then, Flance and Lofi's felt the same. Only Avina and I were fine. Was there something wrong with the water? But it couldn't be. Avina and I were fine. However, the three of them recovered quickly. They suppressed the pain with their strong endurance. After passing through the maze-like ruins, we saw a stone bridge in front of us. The stone bridge seemed to be formed naturally. It was connected to the other side. On both sides of the bridge was a bottomless abyss. We had to step on the bridge to see what was on the other side. Looking from the bridge, a cold wind seemed to blow from the underworld. The dark abyss made our hair stand on end. We couldn't help but take a step back. The stone bridge was so long that we couldn't see the other side. When we were halfway there, the five of us saw what looked like a palace on the other side, but we could see a lot of green light. It wasn't until we reached the end of the bridge that we could see the scene in front of us. In front of us was a gigantic temple, carved with many creatures that we had never seen before. What made this temple different from the others was that it emitted a faint green light that illuminated the dark cave. Like a city of the underworld, this was actually the shrine of Hessendes, the home of the Witch King. Finally, we arrived at Lancelot's lair. The five of us hugged each other happily. We knew what we were about to face, and we knew how dangerous it was, but we had to do it. We snuck into the huge temple. There were two huge statues of monsters at the entrance. After entering the temple, there was not a single sound in the surroundings, nor was there any trace of the enemy. At this moment, unbeknownst to us, 12 powerful undead appeared out of nowhere from the dark void around us. These 12 undead creatures slowly surrounded the 5 of us. They were the legendary 12 necromancers. By the time we discovered them, it was too late. Hurry up and find Lancelot. Don't waste time and energy here. Leave this place to us, Natalia said to me. At this moment, on the city walls of Kellendil, there was a sea of corpses. It was already a sea of corpses. Most of the archers and crossbowmen had been swallowed up by the undead army. The undead army was ferocious. No army in the past could rival them. They were invisible, but they had a shape. Fortunately, there were still many knights from the church fighting, so the speed of this nightmare army wasn't so fast. There were 3 paladins in the city. They were the leader of the Twilight Knights, Dear Paladin Margaret, the leader of the Scarlet Knights, Bear Paladin Coleman, and the newly appointed leader of the Falcon Knights, Eagle Paladin Gregory Gerard. Not only these 3 powerhouses, but all the knights of the church in the city also participated in this war. The battle was extremely fierce. Although they already had some means to deal with the undead, there were still many casualties. The miserable and hopeless group of prisoners in the city advanced to the beat of the drums of Marshal Alonso's troops. They were arranged to block a large number of ghost knights on a city wall that had already been breached by the undead. This was a massacre, but there was no hope of survival. Since they were going to die anyway, they might as well die in battle. Under the powerful sounds of the drummers and buglers, this group of people charged at the ghost knights with all their might. Accompanied by countless screams, these people who hadn't received professional training were killed by the powerful undead like the ghost knights. The ground was covered in corpses, blood flowed like a river, and some people's intestines and fluids flowed all over the ground. As the last person fell, more undead attacked the city. At this time, there were still mercenaries from the Empire blocking these undead. These mercenaries were mixed. Some were well-equipped and well-trained, while others were relatively shabby and inexperienced. Fortunately, the commander of this large mercenary army was still very powerful. He was a person who knew how to fight and had a rich military career and battle command experience. The imperial family had spent a lot of money to hire them. It was time for them to play a role. The spearmen in the front row, followed by the shield warriors, followed by the crossbowmen, and the cavalry brought up the rear. This arrangement could be considered normal and was quite effective against ordinary human armies. But they were about to face the undead, death, and the nightmare army from the netherworld. The moment the spearmen in the front row came into contact with the ghost knights, their spears directly pierced through them. But then, most of these spearmen's heads rolled to the ground. The crossbowmen shot with all their might, but it was to no avail. Before the shield warriors could react, the ghost knights had already rushed in front of them. They waved their rusty swords and slashed at the warriors. Some people's helmets were deformed, and their shields were split in half. Too scary, these devils. Everyone was filled with incomparable fear. Thus, some people turned around and fled. These people were here to make money, not to throw away their lives. Only a fool would live to earn money, but not live to spend it. Chapter 101. Soon, Kellendil's mercenary army's defense line collapsed. Alonso's army couldn't kill them all. It was a complete defeat, just like before. Death Mountain Range. Avina and I rushed out of the 12 necromancers' encirclement under the cover of Natalia and the other 2 girls. The 3 of them held them back while Avina and I went to kill Lancelot. In Hacendi's temple, Lancelot had already sensed our invasion. Avina and I ran inside the temple. I could feel that Lancelot was in there. We pushed open the door in the deepest part of the temple and finally arrived at the temple where Lancelot was. Lancelot was sitting on his throne. Other than him, there was no one else in the temple. "You're finally here, my dear friend, Belgrave Flamaria," Lancelot said to us with a smile. I was puzzled. Was this guy close to Ian Long? What was his relationship with those people? How do they know me? It seemed that I could learn a lot today. "My friend, don't be in a hurry to fight me. I have a lot to tell you, because I've been waiting for this day for a long time," Lancelot said to me. "All right, remove the necromancers at the entrance first. I'll talk to you later," I said. I'm afraid I can't do that. If they can't defeat the 12 necromancers, it's useless for them to live, Lancelot said. Then what do you want to talk to me about? I wanted to rush forward and kill Lancelot, but I suddenly realized that I couldn't move at all. That's right. This is the power of a domain. I've been cultivating for almost 1,000 years, so I'm quite capable of this. Seeing that I couldn't move, Lancelot continued to talk to me with a smile. I'm still excited to see you today. Back then, Erdil came to me and asked me to cooperate with him. He also mentioned you to me. Lyric, you are a dragon descendant. You are the incarnation of the Belgrave Flammaria. Now, your body has fused with Yenlong's soul. Do you know what this means? This means that if your body is strong enough and you fuse with the 7 demon gods' demonic weapons, you might become a new demon god. Although you won't have 100% of a demon god's strength, becoming a new low god shouldn't be a problem for you. I didn't know why Lancelot wanted to tell me this, but I could only listen to him. It seemed that he had a lot to tell me. By the way, you still don't know anything, right? It seems that Yenlong didn't tell you anything. It seems that he intends to protect you. But there are some things that you have to know sooner or later. It may not be a bad thing for you to know it earlier. That's enough. This Lancelot really wants to say everything. Lyric, you're destined to know something today, Yenlong's soul suddenly said in my head. In this world, apart from the mortal realm, there are 3 higher planes. They are the underworld, the demon realm, and the god realm. The god I serve is the main god of the underworld, Azrael Hascendis. The main gods of the god realm and the demon realm are the goddess of fate, destiny, and the demon god, Athol. Lancelot continued. The Belgrave Flammaria was a dragon clone created by the demon god using his own power. He went to the dragon race as a spy. The dragon race was loyal to the goddess of fate. However, the goddess of fate was the demon god's greatest enemy. Although they were both sovereigns, something that happened later caused the 2 of them to become mortal enemies. On July 7th, 512, the goddess of fate wanted to become the new ruler of all things. She pretended to fall in love with the demon god, deceiving him of his feelings and weaknesses. She wanted to kill the demon god and take his divine spark. But in the end, the goddess didn't get the demon god's divine spark. The demon god that was defeated by the goddess of fate wasn't completely destroyed. Instead, his soul was sealed in 7 magic artifacts. Thus, when a demon god possesses the bloodline and body of a demon god, as well as the 7 demonic artifacts, it is entirely possible for a demon god to be resurrected. However, the chief god Spark is currently with Idolai. He has already relied on his own comprehension to become a new demon god, but his strength is only at the level of a medium god. Lancelot said a lot in one breath. I was still confused. However, I understood the history he was talking about. History was always boring. And you, a dragon descendant, are the only candidate that Erdil wants to revive Athol. His plan is to use the 7 of us demon kings in exchange for the complete awakening of you, a descendant of the demon god. At that time, you will gather the 7 magic artifacts and refine the soul of Athol. You will fuse with Athol. Actually, you are part of Athol. At that time, as long as you and Erdil don't stop cultivating, the strength of the 2 of you will definitely be able to defeat the goddess of fate. I could already understand Lancelot's meaning. I didn't expect that this world wasn't as simple as I thought. There were too many things that were above us. Right now, your strength is still too weak. You can't even reach the domain level. Above the domain level is the god level. In the god level, apart from the top, middle, and bottom, the main god is the highest god and controls the power of law. I listened to Azrael's orders and cooperated with Erdil. I became one of the 7 demon kings under his command. Other than the 3 you met before, Bloody Queen Mavila, Warlock Delamere, and Terrorbug King Zulfay, there are 3 left. They also have the remaining 3 magic artifacts. Right, Lyric, you already have 3 magic artifacts, right? Lancelot suddenly asked me. I thought about it, and it seemed to be true. Back then, when Mavila died, the blood-dripping crown flew into my body, and Delamere's shadow wings flew into my body. However, they also seem to have mentioned that this thing called Athol. So it turned out that Athol was a demon god, a supreme main god. That's right. At that time, Idrii attacked Kalendil. Actually, we had already planned to destroy this filthy old world. Irdil firmly believes that destruction is the power to purify and correct. There are too many mistakes that we need to destroy. I gathered the undead army for this moment. Of course, it's also for myself. Actually, that terror bug king Zul-Fa is the new demon king that we created. Lyric, one day, you will understand what it means to be a true powerhouse. When that time comes, you will be above all living things and look down on them. Lancelot said to me meaningfully, after saying so much, I just don't want to sink into depravity like you. It's time for you to make a choice. However, before that, I have to fulfill my mission. I haven't exercised for a long time. It's time to play with you, Belgrave Flamaria. Lancelot smiled at me maliciously. Then, from the darkness behind the hall, a pair of green eyes slowly appeared. Chapter 102. I didn't expect it to be him, the soul of evil, Geron D. Lego, the Belgrave Flamaria said to me. Back in the day, Geron D. Lego had been one of the strongest dragons in the dragon race. However, he had unfortunately died in battle against the enemies of the goddess of fate. Now, he had been resurrected in this form. Although his power wasn't as strong as before, he still couldn't be underestimated. My power had just been awakened with the help of Yin Long's soul. I might not be a match for this ghost dragon. Fortunately, Avina could control herself now. She summoned Ronwhip the elf. This little dragon was truly a miraculous dragon. He was very unique. I also transformed into Yin Long. Just like that, the three dragons were about to engage in a life-and-death battle in this hall. Show me your full power. I don't want you to die before you inherit the magic weapon, Lancelot said to me. Avina stood at the back of the hall, watching us fight. The three of us started fighting. With a furious roar, the ghost dragon pounced on me with all his might. First, we fought hand-to-hand. Then, we quickly circled above the hall. Whenever we saw an opening, we would spit out scorching dragon flames to attack him. The hall was on the verge of collapse. However, it seemed to be reinforced by magic, so it was exceptionally sturdy. Ronwhip the elf and I took turns to attack the huge creature in front of us. Geron D. Lego was indeed very strong. His fleshless body was terrifying. His green eyes and the green dragon flames were like the flames of the underworld. In short, he made people shudder. Geron D. Lego accidentally bit Ronwhip's neck and threw him to the top of the hall. Golden blood flowed out. However, the healing magic in the elf dragon's body began to work. The wound slowly healed. This was the terror of the elf dragon. I immediately rushed forward and spat dragon flames at Geron D. Lego. He writhed in pain. I swung my dragon claws and hit him hard. My spiked dragon tail was thick and powerful. It hit Geron D. Lego's wings. Avina was worried when she saw Ronwhip the elf fall. However, she knew that she couldn't help at this moment. Fortunately, Ronwhip told Avina through telepathy that he was fine. The ghost dragon was furious after being attacked. He started to attack me crazily. He hit me with his dragon horns and stabbed my eyes with his claws. I couldn't dodge in time. Many wounds appeared on my body. Before I could retaliate, Ghost Dragon Drago spat out a mouthful of dragon flames at me. I didn't have time to dodge, so I was hit and fell into the hall, smashing hard on the smooth floor. I felt like my internal organs were about to be shattered, and my skin was burning with pain. Ghost Dragon Drago didn't let me go. He charged at me, intending to deal me a fatal blow. Ronwhip's DS, but at this moment, a thin, sometimes little petite. No, get out of here. I roared crazily. I knew that Avina's actions wouldn't help. Ronwhip bit at the tiny Avina. Every tooth in his huge mouth was sharp. I didn't expect that a blue protective light would appear on Avina's body. It was the same as when she was pinched by the giant crab's pincers on the deserted island. However, the blue protective light barrier instantly shattered like glass. At this moment, I felt a surge of power that I had never felt before. My anger made me even stronger. I punched Geron D. Lego in the stomach. Avina was thrown far away from the dragon's mouth. Her face was scratched, and blood kept flowing. I was angry that I couldn't protect the woman I loved. Anger made me lose my mind. My eyes turned red. I would never give in. Elf Dragon Weipu and I, who had gotten up again, attacked Ghost Dragon Terego fiercely from the left and right. By the time I stopped, the Ghost Dragon was already dead. All that was left of it was a pile of dragon bones scattered all over the ground. Just like when I killed the Sea Dragon, Jiran D. Lego's soul power was absorbed by me. Now, I could clearly feel the increase in the dragon's soul power. On Natalia's side, there were only 6 necromancers left. 6 of the powerful 12 necromancers had been killed by Natalia. But now, their situation wasn't optimistic. One of France's arms was gone. Natalia was injured all over, and Lofi's was covered in blood. A purple sword blade quickly pierced towards the necromancer, who was flickering in and out of existence. At this moment, the necromancers had summoned a large number of undead. The number of enemies was increasing. If this continued, the 3 of them would be finished. Lofi suddenly smiled. He recalled his life. He recalled his mother when he was young, the bitterness when he became a pirate's slave, the limitless glory when he became a pirate's leader, and what happened after he met us. It seems that I can only use that move. Lofi's closed his eyes. He knew the price of this move, but it seemed that he had to do it now. Purple blade, 1 sword, and 10,000 sounds were extinguished. This final move was to use one's soul and blood as fuel to burn everything in the world. Purple blade, annihilation. Lofi's held the purple blade in his hands tightly. His figure was like a purple shadow that streaked across the pitch-black cave. Everywhere he passed, everything was annihilated. Of the remaining 6 necromancers, 3 were killed by Lofi's on the spot. The remaining 3 tried to escape. However, Lofi's was too fast. Even if the necromancers were faintly discernible, and there were a large number of undead in front of him, they still couldn't escape. In the end, they couldn't escape from Lofi's hands. He easily killed the remaining 12 necromancers. However, he also fell to the ground, and his body slowly evaporated into purple steam. Natalia cried and rushed forward to hug Lofi's disappearing body. She didn't know how to comfort such a brave warrior who was unafraid of death. The undead all dispersed. Flance took Lofi's purple blade. He respected this brave warrior. Flance and Natalia walked towards the final hall, pushing open the door to the hall where Lancelot was. Natalia saw me in my human form. She was hugging Avina, whose face was covered in blood, and crying desperately. I didn't expect you to be able to pass the first stage. Not bad, but I don't know if you can pass the second stage. Belgrave Flammarion, Lancelot, who had been watching from the side, suddenly said. Then he walked down from the throne. Natalia, Flance, and I, it seemed that the 3 of us had to fight to the death. I really didn't know if we could walk out of here alive today. Chapter 103. At this moment, I had already changed from my dragon form back to my human form. Avina's elf, Ronwhip, had also returned to the magic space. Flance's left arm was crippled, and Natalia was covered in injuries. Lancelot had already pulled out the demon's sword at his waist. He had obtained this sword from Azrael after he had become an undead, and it was extremely terrifying. I wasn't confident in facing Lancelot, but when Yin Long came out again, I felt a trace of power surging out of my body. I had turned into a half-dragon, and this gave me the confidence to fight Lancelot. Lancelot didn't say anything and directly slashed a blade of the void at me. This blade of the void was extremely strange, and even in my half-dragon form, I could barely see the air distorting. Its speed was also abnormally fast, and the moment I saw it, it was already in front of me, forcing me to use the Yin Long punch of draconic magic to forcefully receive this attack. After receiving this blade of the void, I took 2 steps back and felt my body go numb. Even my blood was boiling. If I had been hit a few more times, it might have caused serious damage to me. While I was still calming the blood in my body, Lancelot had already waved his hand lightly and released another attack. Instantly, my feet sank. Looking down, I saw that it had turned into a black swamp that was emitting an ominous aura. Just as I was about to pull my feet out of the swamp, pairs of green-white hands reached out from the depths of the swamp, accompanied by painful howls. I could even see some heads struggling, as if they were going to rush out in the next second. At this moment, my feet were also grabbed by these chicken claw-like hands, and I couldn't move. This was Lancelot's dead soul quagmire. He wanted to trap me. At this moment, Lancelot was preparing to use another attack on the immobilized me. Flance, who had lost his left arm and was lying on the ground with heavy injuries, frantically mobilized the last bit of strength in his body in order to stand up. However, this caused his veins to bulge, and a large amount of blood once again gushed out from his wound. In an instant, this iron-blooded man lost consciousness due to the blood loss. At the same time, Natalia stood up shakily and tried to cast a spell to stop Lancelot. Unfortunately, before she could mobilize her magic, Lancelot released the prison of fear. A cloud of black fog trapped Natalia, and she was instantly rooted to the ground. Through the gaps in the black fog, one could even see the shock and horror that flashed across her face. The prison of fear could trigger the greatest fear in a person's heart. It would cause the person to be corroded by the dark aura and slowly lose their consciousness, leaving only a shell behind. Seeing that my teammates were in trouble, I became more and more anxious. I frantically activated Yanlong's power in my body. Seeing that Lancelot was about to attack me again, Avina anxiously tried to block the attack for me. However, I didn't expect that the magic that was supposed to attack me would hit Avina instead. I saw the hint of a smile on Lancelot's lips. Damn, his target was actually Avina. After being hit by the magic, a distorted figure instantly overlapped with Avina's body. She fell to the ground and writhed in pain. Lancelot laughed and said to me, "This is the evil spirit possession. This evil spirit will corrode her soul. If you don't destroy me quickly, her soul will be slowly devoured by the evil spirit and completely disappear from this world." Think about it, the pain of the soul. How terrifying would that be? Looking at my teammates and loved ones who were struggling in pain and fear, my eyes almost popped out of their sockets. I felt the anger in my chest burning away my rationality. In the next moment, there was a buzzing sound in my head. A flame spurted out from under my feet. I had unconsciously used Yanlong's power. The arms that were grabbing me were instantly scorched black under the heat of the flame. Then, I borrowed the strength of the flame to fly up and get rid of the swamp. I didn't care about anything else and pounced on Lancelot. At that moment, I couldn't see anything in front of me. I only wanted to rush forward and use my fists and teeth to tear Lancelot apart. But at that moment, I couldn't get close to Lancelot at all, because in the next second, long thorns that were stained with blood shot out from the ground. I was shocked. Using the strength of my waist, I twisted half a circle in the air and dodged the thorns that were aimed at my waist and head. When I got closer, I realized that the thorns were like human flesh. They covered my skin and were even pulsating slowly. Just as I was in a state of shock, unexpectedly, the long thorn by my waist suddenly twisted. Like a tree trunk, it instantly grew a branch and pierced towards me. Caught off guard, my abdomen was pierced, causing my movements to slow down. At this moment, several long thorns rose from the ground and pierced towards me as though they had a consciousness of their own. At the critical moment, I used the flame dragon energy to protect my body. However, I was unable to land on the ground under the impact of the thorns that were constantly piercing towards me. It was said that no one was able to get close to the Lich King of Necromancers because they would be pierced to death by the death god's touch that surrounded him. Azrael's touch surged out from the ground, but its power was really terrifying. But just as I was trying my best to protect myself from the storm of attacks from Azrael's touch, Lancelot released another flame of the netherworld. In an instant, a huge green willow, the wisp, flew towards me. It seemed slow, but Azrael's touch couldn't be retracted in time. The moment it came into contact with the willow, the wisp, it twisted wildly and even exploded. It could be seen how terrifying the skill was. I couldn't dodge it at all. I could only use my body to take the attack head on. At that moment, I could feel the flames tearing my body apart. It was different from my high-temperature flames. It was bone-chilling, but it was also highly corrosive. In just a moment, the power of Yinlong's power that had been weakened by Azrael's touch corroded a few large holes in my body. Now, I could feel how painful it was to be attacked by Azrael's touch. Yes, my flesh felt as if it had been doused with concentrated sulfuric acid. I could only see it slowly disappear. Then a heart-wrenching pain came from my body. In an instant, I could only fall to the ground. The pain even made me lose the ability to move. Lancelot watched as all of us fell to the ground. Some of us were struggling. We couldn't even get close to him. The smile on his face gradually disappeared. The anticipation he had for me also disappeared. "Is this all you've got? You're still too weak," Lancelot said calmly. From the beginning to the end, he didn't even move. He was tired of this kind of battle where he couldn't resist at all. He even showed a hint of disappointment towards me. He looked at the demon's sword in his hand, and a powerful magic surged. He waved the demon's sword at us. Chapter 104. Lyric, perhaps you still don't know, but this demon sword that Azrael Hascendes bestowed upon me can release a curse called Eternal Dream. As for what this curse is, you will know in a moment. This time, Lancelot didn't just stand there, but walked towards us. Do you know why the bloody Queen Mavila was willing to die in your hands? Do you really think that you can kill her with your strength? Of course, it's the same for me. After I die, my magic equipment, ghost armor, which is also Athol's protection, will belong to you. I hope that when the time comes, you won't disappoint everyone's expectations of you. Now that you know the truth, aren't you curious as to why I killed the Holy Emperor back then? Lancelot continued. It was a season of wind and snow. My daughter was chosen by the church because her soul was pure enough. They wanted to sacrifice my daughter, Layla, to the goddess of fate. I went to find the Holy Emperor and begged him to spare my daughter's life. However, the Holy Emperor told me that he was powerless. I will never forget that day. Layla's mother died of grief on the spot as she cried and screamed in agony. I had no choice but to use forbidden magic to find Azrael Hascendes, the undead which King Lancelot choked with sobs as he spoke. I offered my soul to Azrael and became his loyal servant in the mortal realm. I made a deal with him. After that, I secretly allied with the dwarves and slowly controlled the royal knights by the Holy Emperor's side. Because they also had children, they were dissatisfied with the Holy Emperor's actions. The Holy Emperor's strength was too strong. I could only kill him when he was injured and unprepared. At the same time, if the church's light was their final faith, then I would make the world forever dark. I obtained energy from Lord Azrael and formed an army of the undead, trying to uproot the church, but I was too naive. After hearing so much from Lancelot, I was disgusted with those sanctimonious people in the church, but I couldn't hate Gerard. He was a righteous and powerful knight. After failing to destroy the church, I died with a lifetime of regret. Nothing in life is perfect, and it's not easy. I've actually been reborn, but I'm no longer a human. I still have a chance to start over. I once tried to control the power of evil, but it was like a moth flying into a flame. Azrael told me that being strong doesn't mean you will live forever. Only death can make you live forever. Day after day, I wandered painfully in the abyss of revenge. I could feel Layla beside me, but she never appeared. That day, I sensed that he had brought a woman back. That woman was Avina. I wanted to search for Avina's soul, but a powerful and mysterious force prevented me from doing so. This was the first time I had no choice but to give up and let her die on her own. In the end, she attracted you. At that time, I was overjoyed. I had waited for hundreds of years for this moment. I knew that I could finally be free. In the deal with Azrael, if you want to gain something, you have to lose it. I lost my freedom and became Azrael's chess piece. Azrael told me to work with her deal, so I could only work with him. I've told you everything after that. I only hope that you can release the other undead after my death and let them die on their own, especially the commander of the Ghost Knights, Andre. I know that our era will end, and your era will come. Come, my demon sword will activate the curse of Eternal Dream. This curse can make anyone live in a dream forever. It's up to you whether you can borrow this move of mine." After saying that, Lancelot immediately swung the demon's sword. A transparent green wave of light shot towards us. At this time, Natalia finally broke out of the prison of fear. She stepped forward bravely and used all her magic to cast a powerful magic shield, just like how his protected me back then. Natalia, who had exhausted all her magic, finally blocked the terrifying curse of eternal dream. We weren't cursed. Instead, the magic shield reflected the curse back at Lancelot, the undead Witch King. He didn't dodge, but gladly accepted the curse. In the end, he let out a rare, relaxed smile. He saw his wife and daughter waving at him. At this moment, he was so happy. There was no more pain and hatred. No one could enslave his soul. His soul could finally rest in peace after so many things. Goodbye, Lyric Belgrave Flamaria. I hope you never lose your heart, and don't give up on your original dream so easily. After saying that, Lancelot disappeared completely. It was as though he had been sucked into the demon's sword, leaving the sword alone on the ground. Before Lancelot disappeared, the ghost armor flew from his body into mine and merged with my soul. I could clearly feel these magic equipment. Natalia's situation wasn't good. Although she had reflected Lancelot's curse, the magic's backlash had dissipated all the magic that had destroyed Natalia. She might never be able to cast magic again. At this moment, the little ghost girl who had brought us in appeared in the main hall. She was Layla. She turned to face us. She had an extremely terrifying face. She smiled at us with her horrifying, charred face. "Thank you, kind people." Then, the little ghost girl slowly disappeared. Perhaps she had gone to heaven. At the same time, the battle had reached the most critical moment. The undead nightmare army, led by the commander of the Ghost Knights, Andre, had almost broken through all the defensive lines. Even the light magic crystal cannons of the chief magic advisor Morse had almost been destroyed, not to mention the other ordinary troops. Gerard and a few other holy knights were still struggling to hold on. The church had also lost more than half of its members. At this moment, the light of dawn arrived. Most of the undead had disappeared as if they had been roasted by dragon fire. The commander of the Ghost Knights, Andre, turned his head to the east. Alonso, who had collapsed in front of him, was only one step away from him. "Lord Witch King, we did our best." Andre glanced at Alonso. He didn't kill Alonso. Instead, he slowly dissipated in the air peacefully. The other undead also dissipated with him, leaving only Alonso with a terrified expression. This great battle against the undead ended just like that, as if it had never happened. However, he had planted a seed that would grow into a towering tree. A few days later, Pope Coloma held an extremely large mass for the dead civilians and warriors to send their heroic souls to the afterlife. The commander of the Ghost Knights, Dwayne, was also given a grand burial. Flance, who had lost an arm, returned to the Demon Hunter's Blade base alone. Natalia, who had lost her magic, followed Lord Randall and led the last of her people back to Fredenborg to rebuild their home. Natalia, Avina, and I chose to leave. Fate left this scar on Avina's face, and I wanted to make it your glory. After the series of events, I had a new understanding of this world. I couldn't continue living like this. I knew the Hist would respect my choice. I put Lofi's sword into my spatial ring. I would never forget this pirate leader of the Sinjardi Sea. In the Red Moon Lake in the Death Mountain Range, the spatial ring that Lancelot had dropped, which was also the magic equipment at Hull's glory. After many twists and turns and the passage of time, I actually found it in Alice's treasure vault in the Deep Sea Fortress. Perhaps this was fate, a fate that I couldn't escape no matter what. Now that I had collected 4 pieces of Adhol's magic equipment, I only had 3 more to go. Perhaps I knew what I should do next. Deal. It seemed that we were destined to meet. I suddenly remembered that we seemed to have already met in the Warlock Delamere's lair. Wing of Destruction, Black Dragon Deal. It seemed that our fates would eventually intersect. There were no gold coins, no glory or rewards. We completed this mission with a huge sacrifice. Everything was due to fate. Chapter 105. South of the German Empire, Port Prullen. It was called the Land of Storms, and it was also the empire's largest port. As a place with an extremely prosperous economy, it had always been the empire's most developed city. Such an important economic city was naturally guarded by Théoden the Great's uncle, Dregor Aldrich. In terms of qualifications, there was probably no one in the empire who could compare with him. Originally, he had already announced his abdication, giving the position of clan leader and lord of the Land of Storms to his son, but he couldn't do anything about it. On the night Théoden the Great was attacked by the Black Dragon, Dregor's son was also at the scene of the summer celebration of the Hall of Heroes. Just like that, Dregor's son and Théoden the Great were annihilated that night. He didn't even see his son's body, and he had to send him off. One could imagine how sad and desperate old Dregor was at the news of his son's death. Originally, he was the hope of the clan, a proud son of heaven as excellent as Théoden the Great, but in the end, he died without a complete corpse. Since then, old Dregor had been unable to recover from the setback, and was even jokingly called the Sleeping Lion by the people. After the disaster of the undead ended, Port Prullen wasn't affected too much, so it was still a rich and populous place in the south, full of singing and dancing. A purple lion flag with a white background fluttered above the city gate. This was Dregor's flag. A gate guard, whose armor was not so neat, stretched his body lazily. His position wasn't earned by years of fighting in the army, but by his family's money. This gate guard's family wasn't bad. He was a native of Port Prullen. His family hoped that he could work steadily, find a wife of equal social status, get married and have children, and then buy a big house to live a peaceful life. After all, it had been too long since they fought a war, and the civilians were used to peace, even though this world wasn't peaceful. But the civilians didn't care. They only cared about what they cared about. Perhaps today was just an ordinary and boring day for this city gate guard. But this day was the beginning of a great change. It was of extraordinary significance. This was because among the countless people coming and going at the city gate, there was a young man with slightly dark skin and wheat-colored skin. That gate guard and the other gate guards were interrogating the travelers who were preparing to enter the city. When it was the wheat-skinned young man's turn, the city gate guards felt their vision darken. It was as if everything was as it should be. This young man had entered the city without being checked. Anyone who knew magic would be able to tell at a glance that this was a simple illusion spell. But at the same time, he was able to confuse everyone near the city gate. It could be seen that this person's magic power was extraordinary. After the young man entered the city, he seemed a little excited. Belgrave Flumaria. So this is the human you've worked so hard to protect? This is the most prosperous city in the empire. I'd like to take a good look at it, the young man said to himself. This bustling city was also a gourmet city. Because it was rich in resources and the people were very rich, delicious food and beautiful women were indispensable here. Walking on the street, although the young man could not appreciate human aesthetics, he was trying to understand it. It could be said that there were a lot of beautiful women in Port Prullen. Almost every 10 girls, there would be 2 super beauties, 3 ordinary beauties for delicate girls who wanted to be beautiful, and only one of them was perhaps the real ordinary girl. Perhaps at this moment, that ordinary girl would be even more conspicuous. As for those girls who were good at dressing up, you couldn't even see their faces clearly. It was as if they were carved from the same mold. The girls here really liked to dress up and put on makeup. They especially liked to paint their faces very white, use natural dyes to dye their lips very red, and wear very revealing clothes. It was best if they could not leak anything. Only in this way could they attract the men's gazes. At the same time, this was a city that was young and fast-paced. It was really a sharp contrast to their lord. This place attracted young people from almost all parts of the empire's south to come here to work hard and pursue their dreams. After arriving here, the wheat-skinned young man first had to solve the problem of food and clothing. Because he still didn't know much about this place, the young man found a small restaurant on the street that sold pastries and prepared to eat a big meal. This restaurant sold all kinds of exquisite pastries, sauces, noodles, and even tea to drink. The wheat-skinned young man ordered a bowl of noodles and roasted pastries. The steaming noodles were wrapped in tempting sauces. The young man used a fork to roll up the noodles and put them into his mouth with great difficulty. He almost dropped the noodles on the table. In fact, the young man didn't know how to use these things very well. He just watched how others learned on the spot. It's not as easy as I thought. It's a bit interesting, the young man thought. When the noodles wrapped in meat sauce were put into his mouth, the young man felt a tingling sensation in his mouth. He was full of happiness. Delicious. An excitement that he had never felt before welled up in his heart. Another bowl, please. The young man's German pronunciation was still not very accurate. Finally, after eating more than 100 bowls and eating all the ingredients prepared by the boss, the young man felt satisfied. He felt a sense of satisfaction that he had never felt before. He felt very happy. Facing the boss, whose jaw was about to drop to the ground, the young man didn't know what to do. Just as he stood up and was about to leave. Hello, you've spent a total of 1 gold dragon coin and 5 silver dragon coins. The boss came back to his senses and almost forgot to say such an important thing. The young man was embarrassed. He didn't know what gold dragon coins and silver dragon coins were. Don't tell me you don't have money and came here to eat and dash. At this time, a person next to him said. The young man didn't want to use the enchantment spell because he quickly understood everything. Moreover, he didn't want to make trouble out of nothing. He asked the boss to show him a gold dragon coin. The boss reluctantly took out a silver dragon coin and told the young man that he could give him 15 silver dragon coins. The young man smiled faintly and directly took out more than 20 identical silver dragon coins and gave them to the boss. This is for you. So, under the boss's respectful gaze, the young man left the small restaurant. However, what he didn't expect was that several pairs of eyes in the corner were already staring at him. It's really interesting. I just used a little space power to transfer these broken things from other places, and the boss was so happy to serve me. Then if I used this kind of thing infinitely, wouldn't I be able to enslave the entire human race without using a single soldier? It would save me so much time and effort. The young man was thinking about these things. At the same time, he was still concerned about how delicious human food was. The food he ate before was simply unbearable. There are actually insignificant humans nearby who dare to be hostile to me. Originally, the young man wanted to directly control those who were spying on him in the corner to kill each other. However, after thinking about it, the young man gave up. He had a better idea. How about Chapter 106. After finishing his meal, the young man deliberately walked alone to a narrow street with fewer people. The human thieves followed behind the young man. When the young man was alone, these thieves jumped out one after another and surrounded him. Boy, you seem to be very generous. Give us some money to spend. The leader of the thieves held an exquisite dagger and said to the young man, Sure, but I have a question. The young man said in German unhurriedly, although it didn't sound that good. What's the question? Brat, asking for money is your honor. One of the burly thieves seemed to be very impatient. That's right. You guys come at me together. If you can beat me, I'll give you the money. Otherwise, the young man said. Otherwise what? You're really arrogant. The thief with the exquisite dagger was very unhappy. Then, the thieves surrounded the young man and pounced on him. After controlling him, they beat him up violently, just like how they usually did, bullying the weak. But this time, it was a little different. The young man didn't use any magic. He only used physical skills to beat the thieves to the ground. In the end, they could only kneel and beg for mercy. They didn't have any of the prestige they had before. They were like this, bullying the weak. When they met a strong person, they were trash. The young man didn't kill them. Although he could easily do so, this time he set a goal for himself. He wasn't allowed to directly intervene with large-scale force. Instead, he wanted to truly understand humans as an observer. In the end, the young man took these thieves as his subordinates and asked them to serve him. Now, he knew too little about humans. After being spared by this terrifying young man, These thieves were naturally scared and didn't dare to resist. They knew that this young man was unfathomable. "May I ask your name, sir? Can you tell us?" The leader of the thieves asked fearfully. "Oh, my name. Just call me your deal," the young man with dark skin said with a smile. "Boss, from today onwards, you're our boss. My name is Dean. People call me Sharp Knife Dean. This big guy is Abel. He's the strongest one here," Dean introduced. The rest of the group also introduced themselves to their new boss, Ilderai. Just like that, these people were deeply convinced by Irdeal's reasoning. They worshipped true experts, and they were willing to follow their boss around. Another reason was that their boss really squandered money like it was dirt. Following Irdeal would bring them meat to eat. That night, under Dean's arrangement, they arrived at a super luxurious hotel. This hotel was called the St. Mary Hotel. A hotel of this level was something that Dean dreamed of staying in but couldn't afford. But now that they had such a rich boss, they could also come in and take a look. It was a huge marble hall with crystal chandeliers. As soon as he entered, he smelled the fragrance of an unknown flower. This hotel was one of the best hotels in Pulin Harbor. Entering and taking a look, it was indeed worthy of its reputation. Irdeal had also never seen such a scene. It was also his first time coming to this kind of place. He felt that humans really knew how to enjoy themselves. Dean gathered his courage and went to the reception area to check in with the beautiful staff. It was also Dean's first time coming to this kind of high-end hotel. He could only pretend to be very confident. But all of this was thanks to Irdeal's gold. On this day, in Pulin Harbor's Imperial City Defense Army office, there was a long line of people who came to report that they had lost their gold. After checking in, Irdeal came to his own room. This room was fully equipped with all kinds of things. There were toiletries, as well as eating fruits and so on. The key point was that there was also a very large bathtub in the room. Outside the room's window, one could see the bustling streets of Pulin Harbor. After a while, two beautiful maids knocked on the door. They were responsible for pouring hot bath water for Irdeal and serving Irdeal as he bathed. When aristocrats and rich people checked into hotels, they liked to be served by beautiful maids the most. Lying comfortably in the hot water, Irdeal was very relaxed. He felt that the human world was simply too interesting. It was no wonder that the Belgrave Flammarial liked humans so much in the past. Full of Irdeal, he didn't notice that black scales gradually appeared on his face and body. Irdeal saw his own reflection in the bathwater. He was startled. He was afraid of attracting the maid's attention. At this time, the two maids just finished preparing and were wiping their bodies with the water in the basin. Therefore, they didn't see Irdeal's changes. He saw that the two maids were in the process of uncovering their bodies, revealing their white bodies. Irdeal had no choice but to use magic to put away the scales on his body. At this time, the maids finished wiping their bodies and came over. "Sir, you must be tired from the journey. Do you want to relax?" One of the maids said. He saw a white patch, two red dots, and a black mass. Irdeal didn't feel anything. He only felt that it was no different from the food he had eaten before. Speaking of food, Irdeal felt a little hungry. The two maids also wanted to come in and take a bath with Irdeal and then relax with Irdeal. One must know that the people who stayed in this kind of hotel were very rich people. One night for one person would cost 5 gold dragon coins. Irdeal and the others would have to stay for a few months. To be able to serve such a person for one night, the expenses would definitely be high. It was estimated that the tip for one night would be enough for an ordinary person to work for a few months. At that time, the beautiful staff who checked in was surprised. Fortunately, she had seen a lot of rich people before. Seeing the beautiful maid's snow-white bodies, Irdeal drooled. He hadn't eaten human flesh for a long time. The last time he ate was when he attacked Kellendil and ate a few peerless powerhouses. The meat wasn't smooth and tender. It wasn't as delicious as this. Just thinking about it made him excited. Irdeal was even a little unable to suppress his inner appetite. He was too lazy to care about the consequences of doing this. He was a little hungry. One of the maids was panting and stroking Irdeal's body. She suddenly saw that there seemed to be something bulging on Irdeal's wheat-colored skin. Gradually, there were more and more bulges. In the blink of an eye, Yordlai turned into a half-draconian with spikes all over his body covered in black dragon scales. The maid was so frightened that she didn't even have time to scream. Irdil grabbed her with his steel-like black dragon claws. One in each hand was like a cheese stick. He took a bite of each side. The red strawberry jam inside flowed out. It was fresh and juicy, sour and sweet, and a little salty. Before these two maids died, they were still dreaming of easy and quick riches. Only when they were dying did they realize that the rich people in their eyes weren't necessarily humans. So, dear, how do you know that the people you see walking on the road are definitely humans? Chapter 107. The next morning, Irdil thought that the fact that he had eaten the two maids yesterday would be discovered. But who would have thought that everyone acted as if nothing had happened? It was no wonder that countless young girls came to this huge and developed city every day to pursue their dreams. Who would offend those influential people in the city for the life and death of two maids? In the morning, the giant restaurant downstairs was filled with all kinds of delicacies. There were whole wheat, pastry, square, and round breads. There were all kinds of meat slices and salads, as well as all kinds of vegetables and fruits. There were fried eggs, soup, scones, noodles with meat sauce, milk yogurt, cheese, and oatmeal. For breakfast, this was considered sumptuous enough. It couldn't be said to be the most high-end breakfast in the city, but it was still not bad. After all, it was free for the guests. Haha, I can eat to my heart's content again. Irdil couldn't be happier. At this time, Dean and Abel were already waiting for their boss. They were discussing how good the maids were last night. It was really a rare night of ecstasy in their lives. Seeing Dean and the others, Irdil went in to eat with them. Irdil's appetite scared these hoodlums. The bigger the ability, the bigger the appetite. There was one thing that made Irdil very unhappy. It was that these pretentious officials and nobles especially liked to waste food to show their face and nobility. Seeing the wasted food, Irdil was very unhappy. He really wanted to go up and tear these idiots apart, but he couldn't do that now. Wasting a lot of food and resources was what humans like to do the most. The key was that many people didn't have enough to eat or warm clothes. This was the gap between the rich and the poor. The food that the dogs of the rich were not willing to eat was the food that the poor could not eat. After eating, Irdil and these thieves discussed what to do next. Always using the power of space to transfer gold coins would definitely cause problems. It was not a long-term solution. They should think of a more relaxed way to solve this problem. Although these thieves were stupid enough, they had seen what other smart people did. In the city, there were some powerful gangs that were doing a very profitable business. That was the Cupid loan. It was an extremely violent industry. Irdil was puzzled. What was a loan from the love god? The goddess of love loan was a loan made by the big money behind the scenes to the men and women through the gang. The women would first take a video in a magic crystal ball. Of course, they had to be naked. If you can't pay it back, being a maid is still a light punishment. You can imagine how heavy it will be. As for the men, they would have to sign an agreement saying that they would willingly become slaves if they couldn't pay up. The money of these rich people was like floating in the sea. This was called the right to mint money. They could almost create money at will. These people were often behind the scenes. In any case, the right to coin was the right to freely create money. In fact, the church was an organization that had the right to mint coins. They would issue something called atonement coupons, which could be exchanged with gold in a 1-to-1 ratio. Some of the weaker ones would deceive people into putting their money with them for safekeeping. Then they would say that when they returned it to everyone, they would have more. Moreover, they would guarantee the safety of the gold coins. Then they would lend out a large amount of money that they got for free. This way, they would make almost no capital and make more and more money. Nowadays, there were too many young men and women who relied on borrowing to maintain their lives because they had been brainwashed by these rich people into thinking that they were living an exquisite and high-end life. The rich people induced them to dress up beautifully. They knew that they had to dress up beautifully because it seemed that this way, the so-called rich people would take a fancy to them and they would be able to live a life without having to work. The rich people induced the men to buy a house and a horse. If they didn't buy it, they wouldn't be able to find a wife. These men worked hard like cows and horses. In order to buy a house and a horse, they were as tired as dogs. Of course, there were many more. If the rich people said that this style of clothing was beautiful, these delicate girls had to buy it. If the rich people said that this type of cosmetics was good, these delicate girls had to buy it. If the rich people said that this shop was delicious, these delicate girls had to eat it. The most abominable thing was that these rich people also said that the world was so big and they had to go out more. Recently, a kind of door-to-door service had quietly become popular in the city. As long as you sign an agreement with a restaurant, these restaurants would send people to deliver the food according to the address. Each time, they could also adjust with them. In this way, many young people didn't leave the house. They were also obsessed with things called moon candy and happy grass. After eating moon candy and happy grass, these people were so happy that they seemed to be able to communicate with God. In short, there were too many fake delicacies, wastes, and shut-ins that filled these hopeless young people, causing their money to be taken away by the rich people. As a last resort, they could only borrow money from the rich people again. A steady stream of money flowed into the pockets of the rich people. They made a lot of money. Money was worthless to them. What they wanted were things and people. Through all these means, they turned living free people into legal slaves who were walking corpses. After hearing so much, Irdil couldn't help but be deeply amazed by the profoundness of this. However, he also had a lot of questions. But when he thought about it, this was a human, so everything made sense. The phenomenon was such a phenomenon. But how did Irdil and the others become rich people? It was said that these rich people were all in high positions and had outstanding achievements. They were the pillars of the empire, and some of them were very capable. They were able to complete the primitive accumulation of capital with dirty, bloody gold coins. If Irdil wanted to do this, it wasn't impossible, but he had a simpler way. Although there would be problems in the future, it was easy and pleasant at the moment. That was to turn stone into gold. With Irdil's current strength, turning stone into gold was simply a small trick for him. Those alchemists, after countless generations of hard work, had not developed a way to turn stone into gold. At most, they could make something similar to gold from the stone, but it was not enough to pass off as the real thing. But Irdil was different. He directly changed the material. He could do this easily, directly turning stone into gold. Money was as easy as floating in the sea. This was the primitive accumulation of capital, the veritable right of coinage. But because so many rich people did this, it caused prices to soar. Everyone poured water into the pool, and the water would overflow. In short, the upper class was arrogant and luxurious. Very few people controlled almost all the resources, and a large number of people at the bottom controlled a little bit of leftovers. The key was that the rich had already blocked the way to become rich. The people at the bottom thought that there was hope for them to rise. They also wanted their children to study and become rich. They even spent a lot of money to buy a house next to the college. They didn't know that the money for the house was even earned by the rich people. Chapter 108. Irdil had found a way to make money. This way, he could start his economic invasion. And while he was at it, he could also start spending money wantonly and go to various places of entertainment to have fun. At the same time, in the headquarters of Port Prune City Defense, a bald old man was frowning in front of his desk. The recent events had really left him in a terrible fix. First, there was the unprovoked theft of gold coins. Then there was the disappearance of people. And then there was the influx of large amounts of gold, which caused him to increase the price of food when he bought it. It was really strange that such a large-scale economic problem could be done without leaving a single trace. But fortunately, his subordinates had their eyes on a group of small thieves. He didn't know how this group of small thieves suddenly became rich, so it seemed that he had to start investigating from them. This city defense commander was a relative of Drager Aldrich. He was about to reach the age where he could retire, so he didn't want to complicate matters. He only wanted the world to be peaceful and everyone to live in peace until he retired. But he didn't expect things to become more and more chaotic. Irdil continued with his plan, and he found something interesting. The young girls of Port Prune all liked to dress up, and dress up very much. It was said that they had to put on makeup for more than an hour every day. Moreover, they also needed to buy large amounts of cool clothes and eat all kinds of exquisite delicacies. It was simply too easy to make money from these people. For example, a fruit cost 10 copper coins, but if they squeezed orange juice or cut it and sold it to them, they could sell it for more than 20 copper coins. The most important thing was that they liked to drink something called milk tea. The cost of this thing was less than 1 copper coin, but the price was more than 10 copper coins. It was simply a huge profit, and the most important thing was that there were many people buying it every day. For someone like Erdeel who was face blind, he couldn't really recognize human faces. The most important thing was that these girls all had the same style of makeup. Big white faces, big red lips, and Erdeel couldn't distinguish them at all. Every face was the same, and he couldn't tell who was who. In fact, the most frightening thing was that these women removed their makeup. Their pale faces, small eyes, and their faces seemed to be painted on every day, especially when the weather was hot. That greasy look was simply disgusting. The most frightening thing was that in a developed and prosperous port city like Port Prune, the women dressed very boldly. These women especially liked to follow the trend blindly. Even if they had a wardrobe of clothes at home, they still didn't have clothes to wear outside. They were really fed too much, and the most important thing was that they especially liked to waste food. These women may not worship the 7 gods, but they must worship gold. They are snobbish, they are pretentious. They especially like to show off their body resources. Perhaps they felt that this city was too safe. I can complain, but you can't be bad. They dressed themselves up as if they were going to receive some guests in the next second, and thought it was beautiful. She purposely revealed her snow-white chest, thigh, belly, sequins, and see-through clothes. In short, the men of Port Pullen were really miserable. They were harassed every day, and their eyes were stuffed to the point that their brothers were starved to death. After all, if you don't have money, you shouldn't even touch women. She dressed up so beautifully and pretended to be exquisite, but it was all for her sugar daddies. Erdeel had come up with a perfect way to make money. First, he would use magic to mass-produce clothes and cosmetics. Then, he would use the money from the Midas touch to open many milk tea shops and give them to some famous women for free. Then, he would let them advertise it to other women and brainwash them that this was beauty. The first wave of large amounts of money would be earned into his hands. Then, he would brainwash them into living an exquisite life and spending more. This way, the sugar daddies would like it. He would let these women bear the burden of debt, and then let them borrow money from their god of love. There would be no capital, but huge profits. In the end, they wouldn't be able to pay it back and would become Erdeel's slaves and money-making tools. The key point was that Erdeel still had a trick up his sleeve. His cosmetics could explode at any time under his will, and his clothes could vanish in a thin air at any time under his will. It just depended on when he wanted to do so. In this way, a hidden rich man was born in Port Pullen. He was Erdeel. Of course, the things on the surface were left to Dean and the others. The sudden rise of Dean and the others attracted the jealousy of various other forces. At the same time, it also damaged some of their interests. They all cast their gazes towards this new rising star, but the investigation clues and the people disappeared for no reason. Those who came to find trouble, those who came to destroy, all disappeared without a trace. It was as if they had never come. It seemed that the waters of Dean and the others were still very deep. Everyone was fighting for themselves and protecting each other, as long as Dean and the others didn't take the initiative to attack them. From this point of view, the various major forces also had no choice but to tacitly acknowledge the strength of Dean and the others. Next, Erdeel's forces began to move a step deeper. They snatched other forces' casinos, beauty clubs, moon candy, happy grass, slave trading, and other businesses. They were nibbling away, breaking down each of the secret forces one by one. The only difference was that Erdeel had never collected any protection fees from the real bottom within his sphere of influence. And even more so, He didn't allow the kind-hearted people at the bottom to be oppressed. These forces were originally attacking each other, but due to the pressure of survival, they had no choice but to unite to confront Erdil's forces. On this day, Erdil was drinking in a bar run by other forces. This bar had some paid performances, but of course, these performances weren't suitable for some people to watch. A woman in a sequined low-cut dress, deliberately squeezing two meatballs in the middle, walked towards Erdil. She knew that the man in front of her could treat everyone to drinks and put the bill under his name. This must be a rich man. With her judgment, she wouldn't be wrong. Of course, with her charm that she was proud of, there was no man that she couldn't handle. Of course, all of this was what she thought. Some people thought that she understood men very well, but in fact, men didn't understand themselves. Following one's heart and sex, this was the dream of men. She deliberately used her body, as well as her words, to provoke Yardley beyond compare. She took the initiative to approach Erdil, using her body as a weapon. In fact, Erdil's heart didn't waver at all at this moment. He even wanted to laugh. Ignorant humans, sometimes thinking about it was really funny. What was the point of doing this? Erdil felt a little bored recently because he was earning more and more money, and everything was tasteless. He was a god with the strength of a mid-level god. He was starting to feel a little tired of doing these boring things. However, he still wanted to thoroughly understand humans. After all, this also needed to be learned. Some things could only be understood after experiencing it personally. Erdil didn't kill this woman. Instead, he wanted to really understand what made these women become so ignorant, worldly, and disgusting. Chapter 109. Erdil ordered a glass of expensive wine for the woman. After paying everyone's bill, Erdil left the bar. As soon as he came out, he was almost hit by a cart full of huge goods. These working people at the bottom were vulgar and hard-working. That person scolded Erdil for not paying attention and continued to push his cart to do his work. Erdil did not lower himself to that person's level. Recently, he often went alone to the place where the real bottom people lived to experience life. He knew that the person who did the heavy physical work might be the only source of income for that low-income family. The huge gap between the rich and the poor was constantly playing out in this seemingly prosperous city. The rich died of wealth, and the poor died of poverty. Erdil also tasted the feeling of being looked down upon. That was the first time he went to a shop that made clothes for aristocrats and rich merchants. The shop was indeed high-end, but the waitress was almost arrogant to the heavens. She simply had a high and mighty appearance. She looked down on Erdil. Just by looking at Erdil's appearance and dressing, she looked down on him, as if the shop was opened by the waitress. Erdil also encountered similar situations in some slightly high-end restaurants. At that time, it just so happened that a young couple dressed in ordinary clothes saved up some money with great difficulty and decided to go to the high-end restaurant to eat. The waitress may have seen that the young couple dressed in ordinary clothes, so she made things difficult for the young couple and ignored them. They spent money but still had to look at her face. This waiter immediately acted like a lapdog in front of those rich people. Erdil could not stand it anymore and said to the young couple that they drop their money bag. This was deliberately done by Erdil. There were 100 gold dragon coins inside. However, the young couple said that it was not theirs and gave the money bag to the waitress. The waitress slightly eased her disdainful face. Seeing that no one was paying attention, she said that she wanted to give it to the owner, but in fact, she secretly kept it. There was no owner. Erdil deliberately gave it to the young couple. In this case, Erdil hurriedly finished eating and paid for the dishes on the young couple's table. In that case, he could only give them a free surprise meal. Erdil left the restaurant. Of course, the gold coins that the waiter secretly kept would not only be useless, but might even cost him his life. This was because the gold coins had already been exchanged by Erdil for a bag of poisonous insects. Sometimes, don't take things that don't belong to you. It's useless even if you take them. Another time, Erdil dressed up as an ordinary person and ate in a dirty shop in the slums. That small shop was one of the more popular ones in the area. Many people were eating there. The boss's attitude was very arrogant. Seeing that Erdeal was a foreigner, he took advantage of Erdeal in all kinds of ways. Moreover, he even had the nature of forcing people to buy and sell. It was really a case of a big shop bullying its customers. However, Yordlai didn't eat anything in that shop. At a glance, Yordlai saw that there was a happy grass ingredient in the soup. No wonder those diners were full of praise for this shop. They could even endure the bad attitude of the fat pig boss. However, it was said that the small shop later caught fire. It was completely burned. The fat pig boss was burned into a charcoal-like dry corpse. The key point was that the houses next to it didn't have a single spark. Only the shop was burned down. There was another problem in this bustling city. Many people didn't do practical work. Everyone was doing some kind of performance, flirting, deceiving others, economic and financial work. There was no practical value to speak of. The most ridiculous thing was that there was a kind of performance. People who ate could also make money. You heard it right. Every day, they brought different kinds of food and performed eating in the market. The key point was that there were fools who would tip them, and it was a lot. Why did everyone do fake things? That was because fake things were more profitable than real things. There were also people who deliberately wore strange clothes and showed off everywhere. They wanted to attract others' attention. They even brought accompanying artists to draw their beautiful figures. It was really disgusting. There were also men who painted their lips red and their faces white. Their half-man, half-woman appearance was also disgusting. When passing by a red-light district, a luxurious carriage madly rushed toward Erdeal, who was walking normally, and kept shouting, "Get out of the way! Fart! Damn it, get out of the way!" The coachman was extremely arrogant because he was driving a carriage for a noble. However, what he didn't expect was that the legs of the galloping horse suddenly exploded. The entire luxurious carriage instantly toppled over and fell to the ground. The coachman's skull was shattered and he died on the spot. He fell at Erdeal's feet. Erdeal didn't even blink his eyes and continued walking. He saw that not far away, there was a shop that sold skin and meat. An old woman with a few thugs pressed the head of a young girl who didn't seem to have reached adulthood into the toilet bowl. They kept beating her and even poured water in her toilet bowl. There were many onlookers at the scene, but no one helped. However, this was very normal. It was very likely that this woman herself was in debt, but it was also possible that she was really forcing a good girl into prostitution. Erdeal didn't want to care. Life and death were fated. Everyone had their own destiny. Even if he saved her today, so what? In a shop in this red light district, Erdeal also saw the offspring of a nouveau riche who was super good at showing off his wealth. Exaggerated gold ornaments, spending money like water, telling others that he was a rich man. However, Erdeal felt that the more such fools there were, the better. This way, they wouldn't starve to death. In short, during this period of time, Erdeal saw too many things and also learned a lot. For example, the people at the bottom begged and spent a lot of money for their children to receive a good education. However, they didn't think that it was useless. He also saw the imprisoned beasts in the zoo. They were in pain and lost their freedom. Abominable human beings were like this city. They were full of hostility and power. They were like giant maggots that made people nauseous. Of course, Erdeal also saw a shop with a conscience that ran a good business with integrity. It was a shop opened by a cat-human merchant at the bottom of the society. Erdeal drank there and won another bottle. This cat-human couple worked hard in a foreign country with a little cat-human. They worked hard every day to run the shop well. When they weren't paying attention, Erdeal left a letter and a small bag of gold coins. As for the content of the letter, probably only the cat-human couple knew. Erdeal also saw the diligent farmers who worked hard. When they ate, even the ordinary food was delicious, and they were happy from the bottom of their hearts. Seeing the beauty of the people at the bottom, Erdeal didn't want to completely destroy this city. He saw hope and love. These people didn't know the dirty and disgusting things of the upper class at all. In fact, this was a good thing. It was also a kind of protection. It was true that under prosperity were all ruins, and under power were all bones. Chapter 110. Ever since I completed the quest to eliminate the undead Witch King, I haven't been in a good state. Avina was injured because of me, which made me feel guilty and regretful. In order to forget the past, Avina and I temporarily left the Demon Hunter's Blade and rented a house in Kellendale. I didn't take any more quests for the time being and spent my previous savings. And recently, I started to learn cooking from a chef. Avina's injuries were much better after this period of recuperation. The blue protective magic in her body, I never figured out what it was. Not only did I not understand it, even the Belgrave Flammaria didn't know what it was. During this time, I thought about a lot of questions. Although I haven't found the answer, I'm working hard. Kellendale, the place where Avina and I met, is also the beginning of this story. At that time, the Black Dragon's wings of destruction attacked the capital, which led to the turmoil that followed. That day, I thought it was the end of the world, but I was wrong. Lancelot told me a lot about the Black Dragon ordeal, the 7 Demon Kings, and the Demon God Adhole. During this time, the Belgrave Flammaria often came to guide me and told me a lot about the past. I was even more determined to become stronger. Only then could I protect the people I loved and the people who loved me. After absorbing the dragon soul of Geron D. Lego, my dragon soul power increased a lot. Recently, I took time out every day to train myself. I felt that in the previous battles, I couldn't shoulder the responsibility of taking care of the team. Because of this, Lofes sacrificed himself for this mission. Natalia's magic power was destroyed, and she returned to Ferelden with her uncle. Flance also lost an arm because of this. He brought the letter I wrote to heist the Elder back to the Demon Hunter's Blade, along with Kelvin and Mayfair. On this day, as usual, I left my rented room and went to the restaurant where I usually did my apprenticeship. I don't know why, but I always hear some strange voices in my head, as if they want to tell me something. Just as I arrived at the restaurant, before I had time to change my clothes, I heard that something had happened in town. In the morning, people saw a large number of troops gathering in the direction of the Hero Palace. I don't know what happened, but I have a bad premonition. Thus, I didn't even have time to change my clothes before I rushed home. Walking on the streets, there were fully armed soldiers everywhere. Just as I was about to reach the rental house, someone suddenly ran out from the corner of the street and rushed towards me. Her mouth was full of blood, her eyes were black and blue, and her clothes were torn as if she had just fought with someone. If it wasn't for the fact that I was a trained mercenary and that the other party was a woman, I might have been injured by her sudden charge. But because of my vigilance and my body's conditioned reflexes, I was able to subdue her before she could attack me. She did not stop struggling and tried to attack me with the dagger in her hand. Right at that moment, I didn't have much time to think, as more people like her came from the other corner of the street. I didn't have any weapons with me, and I didn't want to provoke them. I had to let go of the woman and run in the direction of my house. The woman and the group of people chased after me. Finally, I arrived at my house. I quickly opened the door and locked it from the inside. At this moment, AI Wayna saw that I had returned and immediately handed me the weapon she had prepared. Even though her internal injuries had not completely healed and she was still very weak, she was already dressed in battle clothes and prepared for battle. She told me that a large group of mobs had come out of nowhere and were causing trouble in the town this morning. After the disaster of the undead, Kellendale wasn't as good as it used to be. Now and then, there would be riots. Moreover, the city was badly damaged, and the number of soldiers was greatly reduced. This city, which used to be incomparably glorious, was now in dire straits. We didn't have much time to think. The mobs had already used axes to break the door and lock up my house. It was the same woman and 2 other strong men. They were holding axes and machetes. This time, they had entered the wrong house and provoked the people they shouldn't have provoked. I used my shield to block their attacks, and used my sword of retribution to stab one of the tall men holding an axe to death. Avina used her ice arrow to kill the other strong man holding a machete who tried to charge at us. Seeing the 2 men next to her fall, the crazy woman wanted to run away. However, I didn't give her the chance. I rushed forward and knocked her unconscious with my shield. When I woke her up, I had already tied her hands behind her back with a hemp rope. When she saw the sword in my hand, she shivered in fear. She didn't dare to look at me and Avina. She could only curl up in a corner. "Please, I beg you, don't kill me." I had no other choice. She begged me in German. Who sent you to cause trouble in the city? What's your purpose? I asked her in German. I don't know anything. I don't know anything. The woman shivered in fear and started to babble nonsense. Don't test my patience. I don't show mercy to women, especially women like you. I pretended to be impatient and prepared to rub my fists. Actually, I just wanted to scare her. However, she suddenly screamed and stared in front of her as if she had lost her sight. Ivana told me to stop interrogating the woman and hand her over to the soldiers on the street. It would be difficult to get anything out of this woman. It was possible that she was forced and didn't know the truth. However, from the way she chased after me with a dagger, she didn't look like an ordinary woman. I had no choice. Although I wanted to know who the mastermind was, I still had my own matters to attend to. Since it was a riot in the city, I decided to hand the woman over to the soldiers on the street. I escorted the woman to the street. Although she didn't want to, I still handed her over to some of Alonso's soldiers who were patrolling the streets. When the soldiers saw the woman, they took out a thick list of names in their hands and compared them. Finally, they saw the woman's arrest warrant. The soldiers were very happy. They even gave me 5 silver coins as a reward. Alonso's army had suffered heavy losses in the battle against the undead. More importantly, the city didn't have enough food. In short, the sacred city of Kellendil, the heart of the empire, was facing an unprecedented challenge. Kellendil was in a state of chaos. As for myself, I was in a perplexed predicament. I didn't know where my path was. I recalled the things that Lancelot had told me. I had to make a choice. I couldn't let this continue. Chapter 111. At that moment, in the kingdom of Northland, a snowflake drifted across the sky. It was going to snow so soon. It was only September, and the moon was clear, but it was already snowing. Looking at the snowflakes drifting down from the window, Gravel thought of Darlena, who was far away in the south. Many years had passed in the blink of an eye. He still remembered the first time he saw Darlena. She was tied up in a tavern. Fortunately, Gravel arrived in time to save her. After that, they fled together. Darlena didn't have many good days with Gravel. She even sacrificed herself to save Gravel. After becoming the Empress of the Empire, Thodin the Great was burned alive by the Black Dragon Ordeal on the night of his 60th birthday celebration. After that, Darlena became the Emperor's widow. She brought along her and Theoden's child, Kaiser, and lived alone in the imperial capital without anyone to rely on. In fact, Darlena and Thodin had another child. It was their first child, a girl. The Empire announced that the child had died prematurely, but she wasn't. She was still alive and well in the kingdom of Northland. The girl was called Isabella. Thodin found out through his intelligence network that the child he had with Darlena wasn't his. Instead, it was the child of Baron Sadak and Darlena. The child was exiled to the north the moment she was born and secretly imprisoned. It was announced that she was dead. Theoden didn't kill the child in secret and instead sent people to take care of and teach the girl. This was already very benevolent of him. However, he also took away the girl's freedom. But how many people were truly free? To be able to live like this was already very good. That was until the Black Dragon attacked Kellendil. Under Gravel's leadership, the Northlands began to fight for independence. Later, Gravel's subordinate, Horfwood, found Princess Isabella of Denmark at a place called Bohemia Manor in Greatbeer Town, Gorgon, which was now the capital of the Northland. They brought Isabella back to Gorgon and brought her to see Gravel. Isabella, who was almost an adult, didn't look much different from Darlena. She was as beautiful as her mother. However, due to Isabella's past and her current background, Gravel could only keep her by his side as an adopted daughter. Looking at the growing Isabella, Gravel couldn't help but think of Darlena. Every time he thought of this, Gravel would feel a deep sense of self-blame and guilt in his heart. Although Isabella was the child of that bastard Sadak, she was also Darlena's flesh and blood. This child was innocent. Gravel took care of this child like a biological father. He wanted to make up for his love for her mother and what he owed her to this lovely child. Sometimes, he couldn't even tell if Gravel loved the child or if it was just because he loved the child's mother. Was that love really just fatherly love? Father, what are you looking at here? Isabella was like a cute kitten. She tiptoed to Gravel's side, wanting to scare this dignified father of hers. Isabella, who was wearing a white dress, looked very cute and lively. There was only an innocent and pure beauty on her face. Gravel, who was deep in thought, was a little startled by this sudden sentence. However, his years of shrewdness made him immediately calm down. When he saw the girl in front of him, who was as beautiful as Darlena and even more beautiful than her mother, she walked into his heart. "You mischievous brat! Why are you looking for me again?" Gravel said with a smile. At this moment, his expression really could be called a kind father. "Father, the swordsmanship master you found for me a few days ago was defeated by me. It seems that his skills are only SOSO." Isabella stared at Gravel with her big, watery eyes. Gravel also had a headache when it came to this girl. She wasn't like other noble ladies who liked embroidery, reading, and dressing up. Instead, she was very interested in weapons, military, and combat skills. It could be said that she didn't like heavy makeup but weapons. Although he couldn't do anything about this daughter of his, Gravel still doted on this daughter of his. He found many teachers, swordsmanship masters, and military officers to tutor Isabella. As a matter of fact, the new swordsmanship master was defeated by Isabella in less than 2 days. When it came to Isabella's combat skills, Gravel really admired her from the bottom of his heart. Whether it was speed, strength, agility, or reaction, it really made Gravel feel that the younger generation was to be feared. At first, Gravel thought that Isabella was just playing around on the spur of the moment. However, when he seriously interacted with this underage girl, he couldn't help but admire her. In fact, he couldn't help but admire Isabella. Whether it was her views on governance or military affairs, Isabella wasn't inferior to the ministers, generals, and lords around Gravel. In some aspects, Isabella's unique views were even more brilliant than those of the ministers of the kingdom. After all, these ministers of the kingdom had vested interests. In many aspects, they only looked at their own interests, so it was inevitable that they would be short-sighted. However, Isabella was different. She was able to look at the interests of the kingdom and had higher goals and ideas. She had a very strong vision and strategic vision. As a result, if there was any problem, Gravel wanted to communicate with Isabella from the bottom of his heart. Although she was still an underage girl, other noble ladies of her age were still playing with dolls every day. Other than liking combat, Isabella also especially liked reading. For this reason, Gravel even ordered people to collect a large number of books and built a kingdom of Northland library for Isabella to use. Sometimes Gravel would secretly sigh, if only Isabella was his own flesh and blood. But no matter what, Isabella was Darlena's child and his own adopted daughter. Now, in the whole kingdom, not many people knew of Isabella's true identity. Gravel treated Isabella as his own daughter and took good care of her and taught her. Now, everyone in the kingdom knew that Isabella was Gravel's adopted daughter and the official princess of the kingdom of Northland. Fate was really an interesting thing. No one knew where the river of fate would flow in the next second and where it would turn. All living things were just the most insignificant specks of dust on the chessboard of fate. What fate awaited the great king of Northland and Isabella? Chapter 112. Isabella was not only interested in combat and swordsmanship, she was also very interested in history and politics. Her personal maids, like her, were also quite knowledgeable about combat techniques. For a time, Isabella, the princess of the kingdom of Northland, was pursued by many nobles in the kingdom. Everyone knew that the princess was not only smart, but also very beautiful. Among them, there was no lack of people in the kingdom. The second son of Duke Orf, Duke Ackerman Wood, was called Duke Ackerman Wood. Although he was not as handsome as his brother, he was still considered talent. More importantly, he was about the same age as Princess Isabella of Denmark, only 2 years older than her. His brother, Patrick Wood, had married Lord Wilson's daughter, Duke Bethman Watson's daughter, Jenny, a few years ago. Lord Wilson and the Lord of Gorgolon had also married, but the Lord of Gorgolon was only an honorary lord. The capital, Gorgolon, was not his territory. Some of the subordinate places, such as Byron Bay and Great Bear Town, were his territories. Although Hoffman had his own castle, Bear Castle, and family soldiers in Gorgolon, the main political center of Gorgolon was still Gravel's Eagle Castle, known as the King of Northland. Moreover, the entire Northland's main army was the soldiers of the King of Northland. Only a small number of lords had their own army. Bethman and Horf were the most powerful lords among them, who asked them to follow Gravel and fight their way to victory. At the border between the German Empire and the Kingdom of Northland, there was an impassable fortress for northerners to go south. It was firmly guarded by Alonzo's father, Tyrone William. The William family was originally just a small military noble family in the empire. It was only because of the appearance of Tyrone and Alonso, this pair of military genius father and son, coupled with the current political situation, that the William family became a dazzling new star in the empire. At this moment, the foundation of the William family, Blackstone Castle. Father, although those barbaric northerners are cruel, their princess is said to be very beautiful and smart. I also want to see her. Tyrone William's youngest son, Joe William, pleaded to his father. Dressed in black, Tyrone William looked at his youngest son with a dignified aura. He was at a loss of what to do. It must be known that the two countries were still in a state of war. The entire Kingdom of Northland's legitimacy was not recognized by the German Empire. It was a fact that the Empire had the will, but it was powerless. It was ridiculous for him to allow his son to go to an enemy country to meet the princess of an occupied country. Moreover, he was the son of a military noble of the Empire. This was almost the same as treason. Brother, don't bother father anymore. It's impossible between you and that northern girl. Besides, you can control those northern barbarians. Who knows if that Isabella will bite your ear when she gets excited. Ha! Joe's younger sister, Blanche, was gloating at Joe's misfortune. No, definitely not. Before I send you to the Empire's military court, you better disappear from my sight. Old Tyron's attitude was very firm. There was nothing he could do. His father's order was like a mountain pressing down on him. Joe could only tactfully leave the castle's Lord's Hall. Blanche, who left together with him, followed behind her brother and kept on laughing at him. This younger sister of his was not like his elder brother. When he was young, he often could not see his elder brother because he had gone out to study and travel. Instead, she had been following him around since birth. Sometimes, Joe really loved his younger sister. Sometimes, he really hated her. However, no matter what, his relationship with his younger sister was still the closest. If anyone dared to touch a hair on his younger sister, Joe would be the first to disagree. That was because in this cold family that only relied on strength, his younger sister was the only one who had any kinship with him. Silly brother, don't tell me you're really thinking of marrying that northern girl? Then why don't you sneak over yourself? Blanche had been mischievous and lively since she was young, just like a tomboy. Although she did not have any achievements in the righteous path, she could be said to be one of the best when it came to unorthodox and petty tricks. Sneak over? Are you kidding me? Now, can a fly come to Blackstone Castle from the north, or go to the north? There are more soldiers than flies on both sides of the border. It's already a blessing that we haven't started a war yet, Joe said unhappily. Then what can you do even if father agrees to it? You still can't cross over, right? Blanche's clever mind did not react for a moment. Of course it's different. I can rightfully visit Princess Isabella of Denmark as the Empire's envoy. Joe was so happy that he felt as light as a swallow when he thought of this. But that's almost the same as declaring the legitimacy of the Kingdom of Northland. Kaiser the Great will definitely not agree to it. Thinking of this, Joe felt as if he was being crushed by a huge rock. Then you should just give up. Ha-ha, I'm less. Blanche's little eyes turned as an idea came to her mind. Unless what? Joe seemed to see the flames of hope rising when he heard this. Sigh, I won't tell you unless you beg me, Blanche said arrogantly. At the same time, she jumped around in her shiny little boots like a little deer. I'm begging you, my good sister. Brother will promise you anything you want. Every night, Joe would lie in bed and think of the beauty from the far north. Although Joe had never seen Isabella, one of his officers had seen the princess of the Northland. Coincidentally, this officer had also learned how to draw. He painted Isabella into a portrait. In the portrait, she was wearing a white combat uniform and wielding a two-handed sword. Her golden hair fluttered in the wind. Not far away, the white horse seemed to be captivated by her beauty. The officer said that his painting was not exaggerated at all. He had seen it with his own eyes. The key was that his painting was not good enough. Although the princess he had painted was also very beautiful, the real princess was 100 times more beautiful than this. She was even more beautiful than Queen Dialina. Joe had never seen this princess before. However, he had seen Empress Darlina when he was with his brother. Although she was no longer young and was no longer the empress, but the mother of the new emperor, she was still as beautiful as ever. It was as if time had not left a trace on her. Most importantly, Charles loved girls who knew how to ride horses. Charles was unable to extricate himself from Isabella and had been thinking about her day and night. "Brother, what's wrong? Do you still want to know my method?" Blanche asked when she saw her brother in a daze. She had wanted to keep her brother in suspense. Chapter 113. Ackerman, who had regained his senses, looked at his sister Blanche with a love-hate relationship. "Tell me, what should I do?" Ackerman could only ask his sister for help in order to see Isabella. You're finally begging me. I thought you weren't going to beg me anymore." Blanche became proud again. "Hurry up and tell me, my good sister. Don't keep me in suspense." Ackerman could only suppress his patience and ask his sister. "All right, I think you can disguise yourself as a group of smugglers and cross over Wilson's mountain range to see the woman of your dreams. As for father, I will think of a way to smooth things over for you. When the time comes, you just need to be smart and go to the hinterland of the north. Disguise yourself as a merchant there and say that you have an important treasure to offer to their king. Perhaps you will be able to see the Isabella that you've been yearning for day and night." Blanche told her brother her idea in one breath. After listening to her brother, he fell into deep thought. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of this method before. He believed that with his sister's intelligence, she could help him hide it from his father for a long time. After all, his father loved this little sister of his very much. However, the problem was that this method was very dangerous. Even if it succeeded, what if Gravel saw through his identity and arrested him as a spy? Wouldn't that be giving away a hostage for nothing? Don't think about it, my good brother. Time waits for no one. By the time you think it through, that Isabella will be a mother. Also, for the sake of the goddess in your heart, you don't even dare to take this risk. What kind of love is that?" Blanche said straightforwardly. Charles didn't have a choice. His sister was right. This was his only chance. Who asked him to love an extraordinary person? A few days later, Charles left Blackstone Castle with a small group of trusted personal guards in the name of returning to Kellendale to look for his brother. Everyone was traveling light and riding fast horses. However, they were carrying an extremely precious item. It was placed in a rectangular box. This was an item that was to be presented to Gravel. It was carefully kept. After exiting the Blackstone Fort, the group pretended to head towards the direction of Gallandier. However, in the blink of an eye, the group of people had taken a detour from their original route and ran towards the deserted path, heading towards the dangerous Wilson Mountains in the north. This was the border where there were very few troops on both sides. The reason why there were so few troops was because there was no need to. There were ravines, jungles, precipitous cliffs, and ferocious beasts. It was very dangerous, and it was easy to get lost. It could be said that there was basically no road. There was no other way. For Isabella, even if he had to climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a sea of fire, he had to give it a try. Back in the kingdom of Northland, Gravel had been troubled by something recently. Fortunately, he had Isabella by his side. When there were things that Gravel couldn't discuss with the lords, ministers, and nobles, he liked to talk to Isabella. He would often be enlightened and solve the troubles in his heart. As a result, Gravel went to the manor where Isabella lived. At this time, Isabella was practicing her swordsmanship with the company of a few personal maids. Among these maids, there was a maid called Kay. This maid did not have a surname because she was the daughter of a slave. She and Isabella grew up together. They were about the same age, and Kay was only 3 years older than her. Kay's mother was from Northland. At that time, she was a slave captured by the Empire and sent to the north to secretly take care of Isabella, who was just born not long ago. Kay also came to the north with her mother and stayed by the side of this little princess who was not liked since birth. Since young, the two of them grew up together under the careful care of Kay's mother. Many years later, on the night of Kay's mother's death, Kay's mother told the young Kay the truth of the matter at her bedside. At that moment, she realized that she and her sister, who she spent all her time with, were people from two different worlds. For a moment, that kind of blow was no different from losing two of her family members, the two closest people to her. After so many years, Kai also understood that people's fates were different from the day they were born. Some people were born to be slaves, while others were born with a silver spoon in their mouths. This was something that could not be made up for no matter how hard one tried, because from the beginning, they were from two different worlds. This was fate. Even though so many years had passed, Kay still took care of Isabella on behalf of her mother, as if she was her own sister. Kay was also a free person, but she was still a free person without a surname. In a manner, Kay was wearing a female leather armor. Her exquisite curves showed off Kay's perfect figure. Kay was not very good-looking, and she could not compare to her sister Isabella. However, Kay was not ugly, just more ordinary. However, Kay's strength was indeed better than Isabella's. She held a small round shield in her left hand, and the spear in her right hand was replaced with a female spear wrapped in cloth. She wore a helmet and was glaring at Isabella. Isabella, wearing a training armor and a wooden two-handed sword, was also facing Kay. The two of them faced each other, and a wonderful fight was about to begin. At this time, Gravel also arrived at the manor with the guards. Gravel indicated that the guards did not need to inform Isabella, and that he could directly enter. As soon as he entered, he saw Isabella and Kay sparring. The other maids were also watching and learning. Kay was the first to attack, madly rushing at Isabella. Her speed was extremely fast, and her strength was also ruthless. She first feinted an attack at Isabella's head, wanting Isabella to block this attack. She immediately attacked with 3 consecutive stabs, but Isabella used her movement skills to dodge this probing attack and blocked it with a backhand block, breaking the attack. Kate directly turned around, using her right hand to wave the lady's spear, and with a horizontal sweep, she wanted to attack Isabella's lower body. Isabella was also not to be trifled with. She waved the wooden two-handed sword and heavily slashed at Kay, causing Kay to have no choice but to use the round shield in her left hand to block the slash. It should be known that if this slash hit her body, it would not be a joke. In this way, the two sides went back and forth, you attack and I defend. For a moment, the fight was so intense that the other maids completely did not notice that Gravel was also watching this fight. Kay, on the other hand, saw Gravel and was momentarily distracted. She wanted to win against Isabella, just like in most situations. But it should be known that when the difference in strength between the two sides was not too great, a flaw or distraction could easily be grasped by the opponent to create a decisive blow. Isabella, of course, saw Kay's flaw, but could she use this flaw to decide the victory in one fell swoop? Gravel did not speak. He only silently watched this fight. Chapter 114. Isabella stabbed at Kay's lower right abdomen. Kay didn't have time to block with her shield. She wanted to retreat, but Isabella followed closely behind her. Isabella quickly bumped Kay with her shoulder, then turned around and slashed at Kay's head. Kay's spear couldn't block the attack. Gravel applauded. Only then did everyone realize that Gravel was here. Only Kay knew that Gravel had been here for a long time. Isabella had won this match, and Kai admitted defeat wholeheartedly. Isabella was very happy to see Gravel. She pounced at Gravel in full armor, not caring about the dust on her body. "Father, how come you have time to visit me today?" Isabella said with a smile. "I wanted to see what you've been up to and chat with you." Gravel was also very happy to see his daughter. "Father, are you unhappy about something? Wait for me, I'll go wash up." Isabella asked her father to wait in the hall for a while, then happily ran to her room to wash up. This clever little girl. Gravel looked at his daughter's back and smiled. After a while, Isabella changed into a blue dress. She looked no different from an ordinary princess, except that she was more beautiful. Just like that, the two began to talk about recent events. "What's wrong, father? Is there something important that you can't decide?" Isabella looked at her adoptive father, her eyes shining with wisdom. "The ministers of the kingdom are really arguing about the new currency." Gravel didn't hide it. In his eyes, his daughter was more far-sighted than the ministers of the kingdom. "I've heard about this, father. It's true that this matter has caused quite a stir in the kingdom. But as a legal kingdom, using another country's currency is absurd and laughable. It's fundamentally undesirable." Isabella looked at Gravel. Gravel didn't say anything. He wanted to hear Isabella's opinion. Seeing that Gravel didn't say anything, Isabella continued. "Currency is the foundation of a country. It can be said that there are a lot of people who oppose it because they have vested interests. They have a lot of interest with the German Empire. They want to keep the empire's currency as a backup plan. Because of this, we have to vigorously promote our own currency. Sigh, if only the whole kingdom could do this. Ever since I became king, I haven't been particularly happy for a few days. I can only feel relaxed when I chat with you." Gravel didn't seem like a king at all. He was just an ordinary person who couldn't find an answer. "Father, do people like you feel fear?" Isabella suddenly asked. "Fear? Perhaps there's not a day that I don't spend in loneliness and fear. As a king, I have to keep a poker face, and I can't show any weakness. I have to weigh both sides' opinions, and I can't let either side have the upper hand. I can't easily express my opinion, because it will be used by others. Not only that, I have to use all kinds of balancing skills to unify the interests of the kingdom. It's really too difficult, but I can only shoulder everything like this." Gravel said what he felt in his heart. He felt incomparably relaxed. This was the only place where he dared to show his true colors. "In that case, we will first reform the currency and establish our own currency and economic system. This way, not only will our ordinary people have a sense of belonging, but the legitimacy of our kingdom will also become more and more stable. Father, your family's coat of arms is an eagle. I suggest that we engrave your coat of arms and your head on the currency. As for the specific exchange rate problem, we can leave it to the finance minister, Salem, to handle. He will know more about this. We also have to leave the professional matters to the professionals and not hold all the power in our hands," Isabella said. "Okay, my good daughter, we will do as you say. In fact, this is also what I was thinking, but it will inevitably affect the interests of many people. The kingdom has just been established, and I am afraid that the people will not be stable," Gravel said. "But only when it's fast can we cut the Gordian knot. There is no foolproof plan, and there is no such thing as only profit and no loss. The king really has to weigh the pros and cons and guide the people to a better state. Sometimes it requires great courage and willpower. A leader must have a certain degree of foresight and must not be indecisive." Isabella said to her father. She did not seem like an ordinary underage princess at all. Who would have thought that the impetus for such a matter that would determine the fate of the kingdom would be quietly born from a conversation between a father and daughter in a manner? "By the way, father, have you heard about the recent riots in Kellendale?" Isabella asked Gravel. "I have. Now, the pro-war faction and those who are waiting to see what happens are also secretly competing with each other. They are all waiting to see what I mean." "Then, father, what do you mean?" Isabella said with a smile. "Now that the kingdom has just suffered from the undead disaster, all the forces have gathered, each with their own ulterior motives. We are also eyeing the dying kingdom covetously. However, the Blackstone Castle is like a nail embedded in my throat, and the kingdom is also surging with undercurrents. It is difficult for us to make any big moves." "No, father. Recently, the strong fortresses have often been opened from the inside. What we lack is a true understanding of the enemy and the means to infiltrate the enemy. All right, that's all for today. The matter with the Empire is not that simple. We still need to wait for the right time. Clearly, now is not the time. Gravel waved his hand, indicating that he did not want to discuss this topic any further. However, Isabella knew that war between the Kingdom of Northland and the German Empire was inevitable and could break out at any moment. At this moment, Charles and the others who had been trekking for a few days were wearing tattered clothes, and their weapons were stained with blood. Along the way, they had encountered many bandits, robbers, beasts, and monsters. The difficult road did not stop them, although some of them had already left this world forever. Charles tightly protected the rectangular box that he carried with him, because it was the key to meeting Gravel. As for what was inside, no one knew. Looking at the forest not far away, Charles believed that he would meet Isabella one day. And now that I am in Kellendil, what I have seen and heard in this period of time has strengthened my conviction and determination. Chapter 115. Kellendil, the newly built Hall of Heroes. Behind it was a swimming pool that Kaiser the Great had ordered to be built. This huge pool, made of pure white marble, was the Emperor's favorite place to hang out. At the moment, Kaiser the Great's favorite banquet was being held here to celebrate Alonso's contribution in quelling the rebellion. Actually, this was just an excuse. Kaiser the Great would use all sorts of excuses to hold a banquet. At the banquet, there was roasted meat, fruit, and fine wine everywhere. Of course, there were all sorts of sexy and beautiful maids and female slaves. Most of the people invited this time were nobles and soldiers of the Empire. Of course, Alonso, who had contributed greatly to the rebellion, was among them. Kaiser and Alonso stood side by side. Kaiser held a golden wine cup filled with the finest cellar wine. He hugged Alonso's shoulders, and his steps seemed a little unsteady. This banquet would last for 3 days and 3 nights. To be honest, Alonso wasn't in the mood to fool around. He knew that the entire empire was in a precarious situation. A few years ago, it was Alonso who led the army to quell the nobles and solidify Kaiser's position as emperor. At the time, the wings of destruction attacked Kellendil. Thodin the Great died without a complete corpse. Only Darlena and the then Prince Kaiser were left alone. Alonso led the army to quell the rebellion, rebuild Kellendil, and help Prince Kaiser ascend to the throne. Now, Prince Kaiser had grown up. However, even his mother, Darlena, couldn't stand his actions. Kaiser had been spoiled since he was young. At the same time, he had seen all sorts of disasters and life-and-death situations. He began to think that since humans couldn't live forever and dangers would come at any time, he might as well enjoy himself while he could. He could live a carefree life. However, the problem was that Kaiser's happiness was built on the pain of many people. Some people's daughters were forcefully taken away against their will and turned into female slaves for Prince Kaiser's pleasure. Even I had personally witnessed an unfamiliar girl jump off a very high bridge because Kaiser wanted to pamper her. She was also unyielding. The bottom of the bridge was filled with water, but the girl fell onto a protruding surface of the water and died on the spot, her brain matter spurting out. And this girl's parents and relatives were also ordered by Emperor Keys to be burned alive. The resentment of the people had always been like a shadow hanging over Kellendil. Even when the undead army attacked Kellendil, Kaiser the Great did not appear from beginning to end. He fought alongside his people. The difference between him and Thodin the Great was like the difference between heaven and earth. Thodin the Great loved his people like his own children. He led his soldiers in the front and had astonishing strength. He was simply a wise ruler that the people loved most. On the other hand, Kaiser only cared about women. He was clearly a smelly brat who was not even fully grown, yet he only knew how to find ways to enjoy himself. He was extravagant and wasteful. Originally, after the battle with the undead, Kellendil's resources were very tight. However, Kaiser did not care at all and continued to hold a banquet. Kaiser even brought the nobles to the bustling areas of the city. The luxurious carriages were equivalent to the lifetime income of an ordinary family. The expensive horses were priceless treasures. On the streets of the city, without any warning, they charged into the crowd. Kaiser enjoyed all of this, looking at the frightened commoners and the injured commoners who fell to the ground. Kaiser personally took out his sword and chopped off the heads of those who were injured. More and more nobles supported Kaiser. These people followed Kaiser the Great and committed all kinds of crimes. The large racetrack in the northern part of the city was the German Empire's royal racetrack. Kaiser the Great would also bring people here to watch the horse races. He would even personally compete with the horses. He would also hunt at the royal forest next to the racetrack. The price of each horse in the racetrack was more than 100,000 gold dragon coins. This was something that ordinary people would not even dare to think about. Of course, the poor would not think about it either. Poverty limited their imagination. What was different from before was that Kaiser the Great's targets were humans. Living slaves were hunted like animals. There was also a huge coliseum built in the city. There were slaves and beasts inside. Kaiser the Great let people fight in it. The flow of blood brought Kaiser endless pleasure. Darlina was even placed under house arrest by Kaiser the Great. Darlina could only pray to God that all of this was just a nightmare. People did not know why Prince Kaiser had become like this. They also did not know when he had become like this. They only knew that many of them had a blood feud with Kaiser the Great. Many ministers and nobles who opposed Kaiser the Great were secretly executed. Everyone guessed that this might have something to do with the Empire's chief magic advisor, Moles. Alonso was also helpless. He did not know how to solve these problems. He was only a military genius, not a political expert. Now that Kaiser the Great had the support of the nobles, his rule was extremely firm. Alonso was also an accomplice under Kaiser the Great's rule. Alonso had been taught to be loyal to the Lord and the Emperor since he was young. In the face of all this, he could only choose to accept it. Now, the entire upper class of the German Empire, especially the nobles of Kellendil, were simply taking advantage of the common people for fun. Corruption, extravagance, and promiscuity swept through the empire. The common people were suffering unspeakably. They were in an abyss of suffering. The crimes of the nobles were covered up, and there was no law. There was a very interesting noble. His house was filled with all kinds of collectibles. These collectibles included lifelike figures. There were even wooden figurines of the Emperor, Darlina, and Alonso. They were as lifelike as real people. Even the clothes and weapons could be taken off and put on. Not only that, but there were also all kinds of strange things inside. It was simply a museum of strange things. Anyone who entered would gasp in amazement and be amazed. Ever since I caught the violent woman who tried to kill me and chose to hand her over to Alonso's soldiers, I began to blame myself. I even started to blame myself. Maybe she was just an ordinary person who was forced into a corner and didn't know anything. At this time, the sky was suddenly covered by dark clouds. Soon, the entire sky was covered. A few huge bolts of lightning fell from the sky, followed by thunderclaps and heavy rain. For a moment, the streets of the entire city were soaked in rain. Kellendil was known as the Holy City, but now, even the heavy rain could not wash away the filth onto the prosperity. The people of the church were also very active recently. They went everywhere to preach the gospel of the seven gods. For a moment, many people joined the church. Under this prosperous era, several undercurrents were surging. An unprecedented crisis shrouded the imperial city with hundreds of years of history. Everyone had their own plans, waiting for the last stone that would crush the empire. Chapter 116. After experiencing the chaos in Kellendil, I knew that there was no point in staying in this place any longer. Now, I have to become stronger. I can't run away or wander around anymore. I told Ivana my thoughts, and she agreed to come with me. At this moment, it was still raining heavily in Kellendil. The heavy rain in the past 2 days was a disaster for the civilians in the city. Many people's houses had collapsed and flooded. The people were already struggling to make a living, and now they were complaining everywhere. Ivana and I decided to leave tonight. We planned to go to a place further north, where we would train harder. We packed up our things. I used Athol's light, which was also the space ring, to bring everything that I could bring with me. We left the rented house, and while the heavy rain blurred our vision, we went to a deserted place in the city. I turned into Yanlong's form and carried Avina to the north. As soon as we left, a few people from the church ran back to the San Antonio Cathedral to report to the bishop. Avina was wearing a huge cloak, and she was also wearing a mask. She was riding on my huge dragon back, and her hands were tightly gripping the spikes on my back. I flapped my huge dragon wings and soared into the sky. Strangely, after we left Kellendal's airspace, there was no rain. It was as if there was only Kellendal's cloudy sky and torrential rain. The wind whistled past my dragon head. Fortunately, Avina was wearing a special mask. Otherwise, the wind would have cut her tender cheeks like a knife. I was extremely fast. Fortunately, Avina wasn't an ordinary woman. Her body was actually very strong. It occurred to me, after all this time, that I knew very little of her history. We flew over mountains, forests, and rivers. I don't know how long we flew, but we stopped to eat and rest. "Little brat, have you made up your mind?" the Belgrave Flammarion asked me. "Yes, I've decided that I can't go on like this," I replied telepathically. Finally, we arrived in the Kingdom of Northland. I didn't go to Grizzly Bear Town because I didn't know how to face High Side the Elder. To be honest, I didn't want to involve him and his mercenary group. Although Lofes was involved and sacrificed, I don't want more people to be sacrificed because of this. They are all my comrades. There are some things that I have to solve on my own. This is my mission. I have written it very clearly in my letter to High Side the Elder. Finally, I flew to the foot of a snowy mountain. This was the border between the Dwarf Kingdom and the Kingdom of Northland. At the foot of the snow, there was a dark blue lake with a hint of dark green. The snow here was very thick and cold. Avina and I put on the thick clothes we took out from our spatial rings. Here, even the air they exhaled was filled with white mist. Let's do it here. This place is very suitable for my cultivation. Because I cultivated Yanlong's draconic magic, there was a possibility that I would go berserk. Therefore, the cold here was able to suppress the raging flames in my body. Also, there was an abandoned wooden house here. From the outside, there were no signs of people living here. Avina and I decided to renovate this place into our temporary home. We didn't know who the previous owner of this wooden house was. In any case, this place now belonged to me and Avina. It was no wonder that there were people living here. This place was simply a paradise with beautiful scenery. It was especially suitable for cultivation, except that it was a little cold. Avina and I decided to stay here for the night. Tomorrow morning, we would start decorating our new home. We pushed open the door of the wooden house. It was very dark inside, and there was an indescribable smell. Avina and I didn't feel afraid. After all, we had seen things 10,000 times worse than this. Avina's injuries were almost healed. Her recovery ability was really strong. However, there was a scar on her face because of me. I took out a torch from my spatial ring and used a bit of magic to light it up. Using the torch's light, I took a look at the general situation of the house. Actually, the previous owner of this wooden house was a very sentimental person. The house wasn't messy at all. In fact, it could be said that it was very clean. However, from the dust, it seemed that no one had lived here for a long time. Using the broom we brought, Avina and I did a simple cleaning. There was a fireplace in the living room of the wooden house that could be used to warm the fire. Even the firewood was neatly stacked in the living room. We lit the stove in the room, and gradually the room grew warm and bright. The reason why the previous owner of this house was very sentimental could be seen from the arrangement of the items in the house. In addition to being neat and tidy, the items were placed in an orderly manner. There were several thick books on the desk. They were all written in Northland language. I casually flipped through them. One of the books was called Dragon on Newfing Mountain. However, there was no author's name. I didn't have time to read it in detail. After skimming through the book, I decided to read it when I had free time to cultivate. There were several withered flowers of an unknown species. They were placed in a vase on the windowsill. The vase was also very beautiful. After a simple cleaning, Avina and I took out the food, water, and sleeping bags we had brought. After eating and drinking, We lay on the bed and rested. After a few days of hard work, we felt a deep sense of fatigue. Soon, we fell asleep. The fire was crackling, and a sweet dream kept us awake until dawn. It was as if we were on vacation. It was as if everything that had happened before didn't exist. It was as if the bloody storm was just a fleeting cloud. It was as if we could live happily like this forever. I still remember that time when Avina and I carried out our first bounty mission. The two of us were stranded on the small island that we later called Ivory Island. Our luck wasn't very good, but it wasn't bad either. We depended on each other on that island. We were very happy. I even wanted to live on that island without any worries. However, fate always goes against our wishes. Everything that happened after that made us change a lot and grow a lot. We were no longer the same people. We had to face our destiny. On the other hand, in the Bauhinia Manor in Ursa Town, everything had changed since the day Flance, Kevin, and Mayfair returned. Once something happened, it would never be the same again. Chapter 117. In the Bauhinia Manor, Highside the Elder saw the letter I asked Flance to bring back. Old Caesar, more or less, knew how terrible this event was. He saw that Avina, Natalia, and I didn't come back. Flance's arm was broken, and Lofi's was a corpse. Highside the Elder sighed. His heart was filled with bitterness. He opened the letter I wrote to him. Words are like a face-to-face. This incident has completely exceeded my imagination. I know a lot of things that I didn't know before. Hist, Sama, you taught me like a father and a teacher. You raised me until I became an adult. But this time, I'm sorry to tell you that I might not come back. Thank you for being with me all this time. It's as if I know what my mission is and what I have to do next. I'm sorry. All of this happened because of me. Now, I have to face it alone. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye, Highside the Elder. Remember not to read too late at night. It's bad for your eyes. After reading the letter, Highside the Elder threw the letter into the brazier. He didn't speak for a long time. The others didn't dare to speak either. The atmosphere was very tense. Then Highside the Elder spoke to the others. Bury Lofi's body properly. We still have things to do. King Gravel also sent someone to talk to us. He hopes that we can help them wholeheartedly, Highside the Elder said. Just like that, everyone went to do their jobs. A few days later, we buried Lofi's properly. As for me, we stayed in the wooden house in the snow for the night. The next morning, I opened the door. The beautiful scenery in front of us was breathtaking. Everywhere was covered in silver. The deep green pine trees were covered in thick snow. It was very beautiful. White steam rose from the dark green lake. Maybe it was because the air was too cold. The air here was sweet and the sky was clear. Occasionally, there were a few white clouds. At this moment, not far away, Avina was cleaning and slaughtering the fish that she had caught. It turned out that Avina had woken up early in the morning, but she didn't wake me up. Instead, she went fishing by herself. Soon, a pot of hot fish soup became our breakfast. It had to be said that Avina's cooking skills had improved greatly. Although it was not as good as Kevin's craftsmanship, it was definitely acceptable. Fortunately, this time we brought almost all the things we used to live in Calendil. Naturally, we also brought a lot of spices. After eating this fresh and delicious fish soup, not only was my stomach satisfied, I felt that my entire body was greatly satisfied. Even the hardships of running around for days could not compare to a bowl of fish soup made by the person he loved. I felt that this kind of life was the happiest. However, I couldn't just be happy like this. I still had more important things to do. Just like Lancelot said, I still had to challenge the remaining 3 demon kings. After defeating them, I would obtain their magic equipment and become the new demon god. Then, I would be able to join hands with Irdeel to challenge the goddess of fate and take revenge for demon god Adhol. After eating, Avina and I carefully cleaned the place we lived in. This way, the place we lived in became very comfortable and suitable for living. Fortunately, the previous owner of this small wooden house had maintained it very well. It had all the basic living facilities, and it was very orderly. We only needed to clean up the dust. I was really curious. Who did this wooden house belong to? It was built in such a beautiful place. There were mountains, rivers, and forests. Before leaving, The house was very clean. I was really curious. In this way, after finishing all the cleaning, Avina and I started our training in this beautiful and somewhat cold place. I trained bare-chested. The bone-chilling wind couldn't harm me in the slightest. Occasionally, when there was a heavy snowfall, I would let the snowflakes fall on my body. In an instant, the snowflakes seemed to fall on a hot stone slab and evaporated with a sizzling sound. My training had been going on for a while. The main thing was to integrate the power of Adhol's magic equipment. I followed the method taught to me by the Belgrave Flammaria. I tried to use my mind to not activate the armor that was fused with my soul. First was the blood-dripping crown, also known as Adhol's glory. I had obtained it from the bloody Queen Mavila. It turned out that it had the ability to recover and heal. Next was the ghost armor, also known as Adhol's protection. It was given to me by the undead Witch King Lancelot. It could protect me from sword and blade attacks. Next was the shadow wings, also known as Adhol's freedom. It was given to me by the warlock Delamere. It allowed me to grow a pair of transparent soul wings on my back. It allowed me to fly freely in my human form and stand in the air. Next was the spatial ring, also known as Adhol's glory. It was the magic equipment I used the most. Not only that, the Belgrave Flammaria finally taught me how to use draconic magic seriously this time. Because my dragon soul power had become slightly stronger, he began to train me seriously. I could now freely switch between my half-dragon form, my full dragon form, and my human form. In my half-dragon form, I could use some weaker draconic magic, which was more convenient. As for my full dragon form, it consumed a lot of my energy. I could only use some powerful draconic magic, which wasn't suitable for normal use. These were the cultivation methods that Yin Long taught me. In addition, my own strength had also increased. I could finally use these magic freely without losing control. Seeing that I had turned into my half-dragon form, I used Yin Long's leap and used Yin Long's fist. With one punch, I broke the tree in front of me into two. One had to know that even two people wouldn't be able to hug that tree. It could be seen how thick it was. However, after being hit by my Yin Long's fist, the trunk of the tree burst into flames. Not bad. Little brat, how long have you been able to reach this level? However, it's still far from enough. You have to know that you will be facing the remaining 3 demon kings who don't want to be defeated by you. You can only defeat them if you use your true strength. The Belgrave Flammaria expressed his approval. Just like that, I cultivated day after day under Yin Long's guidance. Avina didn't stay idle either. She also cultivated. On the other side, Charles' group from Blackstone Castle had finally left the Wilson Mountains. However, the situation wasn't good. The rectangular box that Charles brought to Gravel was forced to stay in the Wilson Mountains. The few people who came with him were mostly injured. A few of them even died in the Wilson Mountains. They didn't know what the road ahead was, so they could only take one step at a time. Chapter 118. November 9th, 1500. The month of Rikshuit was Isabella's coming-of-age ceremony, and the Kingdom of Northland held a grand celebration. Ministers, lords, rich merchants, and all kinds of important people in the kingdom gathered at Gorgon's Eagle Castle. Among them, besides King Gravel Nelson, the 2 most powerful people were Horf Wood, Lord of Gorgon, and Bethman Watson, Lord of Wilson. Lord Horf also brought his 2 sons to the banquet. One of them was his second son, Ackerman, who had admired Isabella for a long time, and his eldest son, Patrick, who had already married into the Watson family. Of course, there was another person who had to be mentioned. He was Horf's right-hand man, Ragnar Northbrook. This person was brave and had a very good military mind. He was a first-class talent. At the same time, he was also a small lord in theft by Duke Horf, and his territory was the Earl of Byron Bay. Of course, there were also many senior officials who participated in the banquet. They were not necessarily in high positions, but they were the most senior. For example, Anna, who had followed Gravel since the beginning, and Gravel's old butler, Haybull, who had supervised the preparation of the banquet. He was one of Gravel's most trusted people. Of course, there was also Gravel's good friend, Tawny, who had always been inseparable. This person did not have any position, but no one dared to disrespect him. Disrespecting him was equivalent to disrespecting the king. Now, Tani had cultivated a little apprentice, who would become his successor in the future. Little John, who had attacked the monastery at night when Gravel was captured and exiled, had now grown up and learned from Tani. It could be said that Tani was almost Gravel's most trusted person. There was also Salem, the merchant who was the first to sponsor Gravel. Now, he had worked as a finance minister for many years and had become more and more shrewd. In recent years, the currency reform, the forced implementation of the Eagle currency system, and the elimination of the original Empire's gold dragon coins was the biggest project he was responsible for. Because of this, the cohesion and legitimacy of the Kingdom of Northland had risen to a new level in recent years. Not only that, the Kingdom of Northland only spoke the ancient Northland language, which was proposed by Isabella. Now, it had been implemented vigorously, and it had achieved great results. In short, the newly independent Northland Kingdom was like a young man full of vigor. It was growing strong and was eyeing the aging Delman Empire in the south covetously. The Northland Kingdom's national consciousness, national cohesion, military, and technological development had all been greatly improved. Under the leadership of King Gravel, the kingdom was full of vitality, and rewards and punishments were clear. On the contrary, in the Empire, the people were miserable, and Emperor Keys was tyrannical. According to intelligence, there was a large-scale famine, but it was wantonly. The upper class enjoyed themselves every night, while the lower class froze and starved to death by the roadside. But even so, the exploitation of the lower class by the upper class did not decrease at all. The gap between the rich and the poor was huge. So many people were driven to desperation, and there were frequent rebellions. Marshal Alonso had spent a lot of effort in quelling the rebellions in recent years, but the rebellions that disgraced him were not only unquenchable, but also increasing in number. At this time, Isabella's coming-of-age ceremony in the king's hall of the Eagle Castle. In the middle of the hall was a huge place with a charcoal fire, and all kinds of roasted meat and delicious dishes were placed on it. Not only did it warm the hall, but it also added some light. On the walls of the hall, the charcoal fire and candles echoed each other, and the hall was very bright. King Ragwill sat near the center of the wall, and behind him was a huge kingdom of Northland eagle flag. His throne was made of brass, plated with a layer of gold, and inlaid with rubies and sapphires. Beside Gravel stood two people. One was Tani, and the other was a warrior fully armed with a sword and shield. He was the kingdom's #1 knight, Roderick Anderson. He was the only person present with a weapon. He was King Gravel's personal bodyguard, and also a young and promising knight of the kingdom. On both sides of the charcoal fire were many long cypress tables, and the ministers of the kingdom were seated according to their own positions. Tani's apprentice, John, was busy. This was also a chance for him to train. One had to know that it wasn't easy to serve tea and water to these big shots. At the beginning of the banquet, everyone just ate and drank in their own seats. These northerners from the cold were very bold, and even a little barbaric. This was the northerners, the true warriors of the Northland. Everyone chatted with each other. After all, there was not often time to sit together and talk like this. The maids were in charge of serving the dishes and pouring the wine, while the cooks were seriously preparing the food. The food here was very sumptuous, and this was also due to Gravel's efforts in the past few years. The kingdom was prosperous, and the people were very grateful. Seeing that everyone was half full, Gravel said in his dignified voice, "Quiet, my lords and ministers. I have something to discuss with you." The group of important figures of the kingdom who were laughing and joking slowly quieted down. Horf also put down the horn cup filled with honey wine that he had just picked up. Gravel said happily, "Today is my daughter's coming-of-age ceremony. Thank you all for coming. At the same time, I also have something important to announce to you all." The ministers of the kingdom listened attentively. They wanted to know what it was. Could it be the princess's marriage? If that was the case, half of the people present would be tempted, and the rest could only sigh that they were either married or too old. Just today, I learned that a large-scale riot had occurred in the Empire's calendar. This winter was exceptionally cold, and they encountered a famine that they had never experienced before. I heard that the situation in the entire kingdom is very bad. This is the best opportunity we have had in years. I have decided that when spring warms up a little tomorrow, we will lead the army to the south and stab the Empire's throat heavily. At the same time, I would also like to invite today's star, Princess Isabella of Denmark, to take a seat. Gravel announced. King of the Northland, King of the Northland, King of the Gravel, King of the Northland. The silence was followed by a burst of enthusiastic cheers. Amidst the cheers, everyone saw Princess Isabella Nelson in a white dress walk to the side of the hall from the back. She sat in her seat, not far from Gravel. At this time, the atmosphere of the banquet reached a climax. Everyone was happy to see such a beautiful princess. Next, let us accompany this wonderful night in the company of wine and delicious food, Gravel said. Chapter 119. The nobles ate delicious food, drank wonderful honey wine, and played happily with the maids. The whole banquet went on in a cheerful atmosphere, and everyone was full of anticipation for the upcoming war. During the banquet, Ackerman even tried to propose to Isabella in front of everyone, but was politely rejected by the princess. The hall was filled with laughter, and Ackerman was embarrassed. At the same time, he made up his mind to play a role in this war and prove to everyone. The party lasted until dawn, and everyone went back to their rooms to rest while waiting for the next battle plan. At the same time, in Blackstone Fort, Tyrone was throwing a tantrum at his subordinates, and Blanche was trembling in fear. "How long has it been? And you have no news at all. Is this how you get your information? My lord, it's getting harder and harder to plant spies. The Northland has fully adopted the ancient Northland language, and it's easy to distinguish them. There's really no news of Charles in the Sea of People." The officer in charge of intelligence reported. "It's been so long, and you still haven't found your brother. Look at what you've done." Tyrone glared at Blanche. Blanche also felt guilty. Her brother wasn't dead, was he? Logically speaking, he should have seen Gravel. A few months later, it was spring again. Winter had just passed, and the weather had become warmer. The various nobles of the Kingdom of Northland had finished gathering their troops, and everyone set up camp in Byron Bay. In the battle command tent, Gravel personally issued the battle plan. Other than some soldiers who stayed behind to guard the fort, all of the kingdom's elites were mobilized. This time, the king was going to lead the expedition himself. Although Isabella and Kay also requested to go, Gravel still rejected them. He let them be in charge of defense, because the enemy could easily take advantage of the situation. This time, Gravel and the rest did not choose to attack Blackstone Fort directly, as that would not be worth the loss. They wanted to take a ship to the south and attack the Empire's economic hub, Springport. It was said that it was one of the few places in the Empire that was overflowing with oil. The Lord of Spring Harbor was Drago Aldrich, a figure from the same generation as Thodin. He was now an old man with only a bag of old bones left. March 2nd, 1501. The windy Muna Majestic fleet passed through the Cinca Underground Sea, bypassed the coastline of the German Empire, and headed straight for Port Pullen. Dreg, who was lying on the sickbed, had his right eye twitching nonstop. He had a panicked feeling that something big was about to happen. Recently, his body had been getting weaker and weaker, and he had been lying on the bed every 2 to 3 days. The one who replaced Dreger in charge of the Empire's strategic town was Rear Admiral Narland. He was part of the Empire's younger generation and had a good relationship with Alonso. However, he was a slightly conceited person. He did have some talent. Otherwise, the Empire would not have handed over the defense of the Empire's economic stronghold to him. He also invented something called the Narland Line, claiming that no one could attack Port Prin from the sea. This Narland Line was indeed a bit powerful. First, he had people connect the Empire's warships with special things, making them look like a water base. At the same time, it was no different from a military stronghold on the water. No ship could beat this colossus. Then, he also set up 2 tall towers at the entrance of the port. There were 2 huge iron chains under the water. As long as the iron chains were raised, no ship could enter the port. Not only that, but there were also Empire's airships patrolling the sky. These airships had a lot of things like oil tanks on them, which could be used to find and destroy enemies in the first place. Even so, they could not stop the enemy. There were also the strong walls and fortresses of Port Prin. There were also various sentry posts, watchtowers, fortresses, and so on, forming a defensive net. It could only be said that this line of defense was like a huge trap. If the prey did not come up, it would be death. This was also the invention that Narland was most proud of. He was not afraid of any enemy at all. In the city, Narland also had a large number of troops stationed, so the enemy would die if they attacked from land or water. On Gravel's side, their fleet was sailing on the endless sea. This fleet was made up of 3 main forces. Gravel's fleet had a white background with a black-edged falcon sail. Half's fleet had a purple background with a giant golden bear sail, and Bethman's fleet had a yellow background with 2 crossed black axe sails. These long ships of the Northland were not very big, but they were very flexible and could withstand the test of strong winds and waves. Gravel's face was painted blue with plant dye, which was the blessing of God. Legend had it that the Northland god, Audiobook, led his 12 warriors to any corner of the world on the Northland longships, winning every battle. After they left the mortal world, in Audiobook's temple, Havagard, they drank and reveled all day long, eating good food and wine, and fighting endless battles. They died in battle in the morning and drank together at night. Legend had it that only the brave Northland people who died in battle could be summoned to Havagard by Audiobook to fight with God. Gravel kissed the warrior's armband on his right hand. This was something that every adult Northland man could wear. This was not only a proof of wisdom and courage, but also a blessing from God to every Northland man who went to war. At this time, the sound of drums came from Horf's fleet, followed by a majestic and imposing song. This was a way for the Northland sailors to row and unify the rhythm, and also a way for the ships to communicate with each other. Then Gravel's fleet did the same, and finally, Bethman's fleet. As far as the eye could see, it was vast and mighty. Every warrior was 1 in 100, and they were not afraid of death. Port Prim, also known as the Land of Storms, was not called the Land of Storms for no reason. Storms of all sizes occurred here all year round. Sometimes, on a sunny day, dark clouds would suddenly appear, blowing strong winds and setting off waves. All kinds of capriciousness. No one knew if God wanted to play a joke on Gravel, but suddenly, strong winds blew from all directions on the sea. Not good. A storm is coming, Ragnar, who had rich sailing experience, said to Horf. Horf hurriedly ordered people to blow the horn, and everyone knew what they were going to face next. At this time, the warriors rowing the ships began to roar in a low and orderly voice. Although the sound was low, it resounded through the sky and was very shocking. What was going to come would come. For a time, the sky had become dark, the sea was turbulent, the wind was raging, and the whole sea seemed to be roaring, as if it was going to swallow them up. "Hold on tight, everyone," Gravel roared. Everyone was a little nervous, but they were unafraid of death. Chapter 120. The wind was howling, the waves were roaring, and the gods were sending down the lightning of their judgment. The Northland fleet had not yet approached Poland port when they encountered an unprecedented huge sea storm in the sea. Although Gravel and the others were mentally prepared, the storm was indeed a bit bigger. The sailors rowed frantically to break through the ferocious storm. Gravel and the others did not use large ships this time, because these so-called large ships were not worth mentioning for the Imperial Navy. They were simply live targets. On the contrary, Northland's ancient dragon-headed ships could break up the army into parts, and their flexibility, mobility, and speed were all very good. For example, if they encountered this storm, if those large ships were slow and stupid, once they were smashed by the wind, all the people on board would be finished, and the losses would be very heavy. Gravel and the others relied on the ancient dragon-headed ships this time to quickly escape the sea. But even if they escaped, the losses were also very heavy. A large number of crew and sailors were swept into the sea, obeying Audiobook's summons. Nearly one-third of the dragon-headed ships were smashed and sunk to the bottom of the sea. "Ackerman, are you okay?" Patrick said to his brother. "It seems that God Audiobook has not planned to summon me to Havagard." After saying that, the two brothers looked at each other and smiled. "My sons, we're about to reach Primordial Harbor. Brace yourselves, you're all true warriors." "Ackerman, don't you like Isabella? Then you have to perform well this time." Horf saw that his sons were all right and also breathed a sigh of relief. Ragnar stared at the sea in the distance and was lost in thought. Just now, he was also clinging to the mast of the ship to not be swept into the sea. On Gravel's side, Anna, Tawny, and the first knight Roderick had just escaped from the tiger's mouth. "Brothers, Audiobook is watching us. Pullin Port is just ahead. There are countless beauties, food, and treasures inside. Those things are waiting for us to take. You are the strongest warriors. Let us break through this sea fortress that they claim will never fall." Gravel roared at the crew. Who? Whoosh! From the sea came the sonorous battle cry of the Northland people. Gravel and the others had already studied the Nowlan defensive line before the war. They had brainstormed a set of tactics that targeted this defensive line. This was all thanks to the intelligence organization that Gravel had planted in Primordium Port early on. The Northland fleet docked at a place some distance away from the mouth of Port Pullin and stopped. They planned to set up camp here. Fortunately, those damn Imperial airships wouldn't patrol this area because they didn't have enough energy to fly to this place. Being able to find this blind spot was the result of years of hard work by the intelligence organizations. They had drawn the map for Gravel. All the Northland people quickly unloaded their supplies and chose to camp on the coast. After a night's rest, Gravel and Bethman led their men to climb the mountain according to the plan. There were cliffs all around, and it was very difficult to climb up. However, these difficulties were nothing to the brave Norsemen. They risked their lives and climbed up the steep cliffs. Although many of them would never see the sun tomorrow, perhaps they would be drinking with Audiobook in Havagard. Gravel and Bethman risked their lives to climb up the cliff. Tawny almost fell and was smashed to pieces. Fortunately, Roderick grabbed him. On Horf's side, he, his two sons, and Ragnar were collecting some dry wood. They didn't set off with Gravel and the others. After a few days of trekking, Gravel and the others had to eat and sleep in the open. If they didn't have anything to eat, they would hunt. The main thing was that there wasn't enough water, so they could only starve. At this moment, Port Pullin was as usual. It was brightly lit, singing and dancing. These people had been peaceful for too long. They didn't know that there was such a thing as war in the world, let alone that it would come to them. Finally, Gravel and the others saw Port Pullin not far away from the other side of the mountain. This port city was really magnificent. Gravel and the others were a little surprised. No wonder this was the economic center of the empire. Taking advantage of the darkness, Gravel and the others sent a reconnaissance team to the bottom of the mountain to explore the dense city walls, outposts, and watchtowers. This small team was led by Anna. They were going to deal with the situation and investigate the situation. In this corner, the defensive facilities here could be said to be airtight. This Nowlan defense line really wasn't just for show. After dealing with a few small outposts, Anna went back to report the situation to Gravel. They decided to take advantage of the night to launch a general attack here. This was their best opportunity. These soldiers of the Empire were all from Drago Aldrich's family. They were wearing white and purple lion robes, and inside, they were wearing plate armor, chain armor, or even chain armor. They stood lazily at night watch. Many of them were young people who had just come of age and didn't have much experience. Their families spent money to let them plate themselves here so that they could get a good job when they returned. Some of the older soldiers went straight to sleep. Some even drank and came here to sleep. War was too far away from them. This was a normal night, a boring and ordinary day. But today was destined to be different because of the arrival of Gravel and the others. March 17th, 1501. A gentle breeze and moonlight night. Perhaps it was because of Aldrich's protection, but the moonlight was much dimmer tonight. This was very advantageous for Gravel and the others. A young soldier had been standing here like an idiot for 2 hours because of the old soldier's bullying. His legs were numb, but the old soldier didn't even help him. There was a rule from above that they had to stand straight at night. The key was that this soldier's eyesight wasn't very good. Back then, his family had spent a lot of money to get him here. He could faintly see some movement on the other side of the mountain. Perhaps it was some kind of beast. In any case, it couldn't be an enemy. After so many years, the young people of the Empire didn't know what war was. Gravel and the other battle-hardened warriors had crawled out of death time and time again. They were all unafraid of death, hoping to drink and chat merrily with God Olliger after they died in battle and telling their stories. But soon, the soldier felt that something was wrong. He shook the drunk, old soldier awake. The old soldier was still in a daze. He came up and slapped the young soldier. But then, they didn't have to worry about the dispute between the two sides anymore. They were all taken care of by Gravel and the others who came down from the mountain. A large number of people were taken care of at the first moment. Just like that, Gravel and the others rushed into the city. The show was about to start. Chapter 121. Unfortunately, there were still beacons on the lookout towers, so Gravel and the rest could only move faster. Gravel decided to split his troops into 2 groups. Bethman and the rest would be responsible for dealing with the city guards, while Gravel and the rest would go to the city wall at the front of the harbor, open the gate, and destroy the 2 towers that were connected to the iron chains. According to the agreement, Horf should be left behind to guard the ships at the campsite, while he should be waiting outside with the rest of his men. Gravel and the rest would give Horf a signal after they succeeded. At night, the airships would not take off, so their detection range was limited. At that time, as long as Horf and the rest broke through the blockade of the ships, they would be able to meet up with Gravel and the rest. At that time, the whole city would be easily taken down. Bethman led the Northland army and quickly rushed into the city. Although the beacons were already lit, because some of the soldiers were lazy, they did not sound the alarm. Besides, these things had not been touched for many years, so people had forgotten about their existence. Although it was already evening, most of the people in the city were not sleeping. They were either shopping on the streets, drinking in the bars, or doing what they liked at home. Several groups of patrolling city guards were walking back and forth on the main streets of the city. They had to ensure the safety of the people. Bethman led these fully armed Northland warriors to the edge of the city, so the people in the city did not know that the enemy had already attacked the city. This place was also considered a bustling night market, so there were many pedestrians even at night. The streets were bustling with people, so no one noticed these Northland warriors with black crossed axes painted on their shields. Occasionally, a few drunkards would pass by them, thinking that they were strange people wearing strange clothes. With just one swing of the axe, the man's head was separated from his body, and it rolled to the feet of a little girl like a ball. The little girl kicked it, and she asked her mother what it was. Her mother took a look and was instantly scared out of her wits. She wanted to shout, but it was as if her body was not under her control, and she could not shout. Taking the lead, Bethman shot an arrow toward the man who looked like a military officer in a group of city guards not far away. At this time, Bethman's subordinates were like ferocious tigers, rushing towards the unarmed people. These people who had been at peace for too long were simply too numerous. Even if they just stood there and let Bethman and the others kill them, it would take them half a day. The city guards were also in an uproar as they rushed towards the invaders. Of course, the following battle was not a battle at all. It was simply a lion eating a lamb. After so many days of difficulties and dangers, these people could finally let go of the slaughter. People were in a panic. They had never thought that disaster would befall them like this. Cries and screams rose and fell one after another. For a moment, more people were trampled to death than the Northland people. The Imperial City Defense Army, which had never been baptized by war, was slaughtered by these battle-hardened Northland warriors as if they were vegetables. When Bethman and the others saw the food and drinks on the stalls, they directly took them and ate them. At the same time, they also killed a few civilians for fun. Bethman could speak German. He used German to shout to the civilians that if they dared to escape, they would be killed. If they squatted on the ground with their hands on their heads, they would be spared. It was simply a disaster for a people who valued martial arts to come to this prosperous place. Bethman and the others ate and drank to their heart's content. These few days were really too hard. Too many people did not live to see this scene. Other than those who surrendered, the rest of the city guard were just a pile of corpses. Bethman and the others could not stay here for too long. They had to continue to enter the city because Gravel's side was already fighting with the guards on the city wall. Bethman wanted to cut off the city guards who were going to support them. He ordered a few people to stay here to guard the prisoners of war and the civilians. Many of the people at home had their doors tightly shut. They did not know who these people were. Could they be the Norsemen from the north? Impossible. This place was far away from the north. Bethman and the others continued to kill the city guards in the city. The number of city guards was really large. Although their fighting strength was almost negligible, they still had a lot of cavalry. The Northland warriors in charge of guarding those people were Wilson's men. They did not speak German at all. The two sides confronted each other just like that. Although the people below surrendered on the surface, there were still some who did not know their place. A few people were plotting to resist. A Northland man saw them and immediately walked over to kill the German with a sword. The surrounding people immediately surrounded the Northland warrior. They were unarmed and wanted to bully him with numbers. The other Northland people saw this scene and immediately laughed. Under the signal of the leader, a few streets were blocked. The German immediately shouted something in German. The women and children, some men and young people who were squatting on the ground with their hands on their heads, tried to escape. The Northland guards were at most 20 to 30 people. There were at least 1,000 people who surrendered, and more than 2,000 people had already died. There was a mother with 2 children. Their father had been cut open, and they wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape. As for the Northland warrior who was surrounded, he cut off the arm of one of the people with his sword and knocked out another tall German with his shield. Then he stabbed a bald man through the mouth with his sword. Another person tried to grab the shield and entangle him, but he was kicked to the ground. The ordinary people who wanted to escape were killed by the Northland guards who were guarding the streets. In a moment, these people were splashed with the blood of the German, and they were like killing gods. The German were scared out of their wits. They obediently surrendered and became prisoners again. But this time, they might not be treated so well. The men of the German were pulled out of the crowd, and the Northland people killed them in front of the people. The remaining people were scared out of their wits. They did not dare to resist and could only pray to the 7 gods that they were not the ones who died. The mother, who wanted to escape, covered the eyes of her 2 children tightly. But in fact, the children saw this scene through the gaps between their mother's trembling fingers. A man's head was directly cut open by an axe, and his brain matter flowed all over the ground. The Northland people were killing these defenseless weaklings for fun. Because of the language barrier, they killed even more unscrupulously. It could even be said that they were venting all the suffering they had suffered since the war. They had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Chapter 122. For a moment, the city was in chaos, and there was killing everywhere. Gravel and the others also rushed to the city wall near the port, and they were going to fight to the death with the guards. The guards guarding the main gate were not the same as the city guards, and they were all elites of the Empire. It must be known that the entire military of Spring Harbor was under the control of Rear Admiral Narland. The elite troops stationed to the city walls were also under his command. Not only that, but Narland's command post was on the city wall near the port. Gravel and the others had encountered a tough opponent, and the battle did not go as smoothly as expected. In addition to the Northland soldiers guarding the various areas, the main force led by Bethman also intercepted a large number of city guard from the west side of the city to reinforce the east side. Looking at the Northland soldiers that Bethman ordered to guard the various areas, they only started to rest after killing nearly 90% of the Derman men. There was enough blood tonight, and God would definitely be proud of them. Stopping the killing did not mean that the suffering of the people was over. A beautiful woman who was dressed up but had long been scared out of her wits, and her makeup was ruined. She was so scared that she trembled. She was just a rich girl who came here to eat delicious food at night. Other than a few Northland soldiers guarding the streets, the others had eaten their fill, and they began to search for young and beautiful Derman women in the crowd. There was a young girl wearing traditional Derman clothes, and she was spotted by the Northland soldiers at a glance. Normally, she liked to attract attention the most, and she always felt good about herself, thinking that she was the most traditional woman. Tonight, she was pulled out of the crowd, and she was so scared that she could not move her legs. There's also the beautiful rich girl and so on. The Northland soldiers picked out 20 or so young Derman women from the crowd, like they were picking goods. They were brought to the front of the crowd, and from time to time, there were sobs from these girls. The people below knew what was going to happen, but they only wanted to protect themselves and pretend that it had nothing to do with them. Please imagine the next scene by yourself, and do not speak. A few of the Derman men who were still alive couldn't help but look at the women. They also had such thoughts, but they didn't have the ability to do so. They were scared silly. How could they, who had lived in peace since they were young, imagine such a scene? Even hell couldn't be compared to this. Then, in front of everyone, these women were viciously F***ed. The Northland people took turns to F***k them, and the people guarding the street also F***k'd them. Everyone was F***k'd more than once. The people below didn't even dare to let out a fart. Those women used to be as beautiful as flowers, but now they had all become withered flowers. Those who tried to resist had their arms and legs chopped off and bled. The Northland people even found some perverted Derman men in the crowd and let them join in the revelry. The women were also given to these perverted men to enjoy. These men pretended to be unwilling on the surface, but gradually they became quite happy. These Derman people, who usually only cared about money and power and lived a decent life, were now living a life worse than dogs. They didn't have the ability, but they still mocked those who valued martial arts. They deserved it. A civilized society made people forget the law of the jungle. They only thought about benefits and how to climb up, but they forgot that this world wasn't necessarily peaceful. The things they cherished might be worthless. Some of the women who were tortured beyond recognition were directly killed, and some died because they couldn't take it anymore. Some were tortured to death, such as the big white rabbit, which was cut off and cut open. There were also some children who were picked up by the Northland people with spears and swung around. The mother with 2 children was stabbed in the stomach with a spear, and blood flowed all over the ground. The 2 children were treated as food and cooked in a pot of oil in front of her. Killing was just for fun. As the number of people decreased, these Derman people became numb. No one had the slightest thought of resisting. They only wished that they didn't die. Even if they did, they only wished that it would be easier. Another Delman man was put into a gunny sack and burned alive. His cries of pain and curses were heart-wrenching. Just before he was dragged out of the crowd, he was still begging for mercy with a smile on his face. On Gravel's side, the war wasn't going well. At the beginning, Gravel and the others relied on the advantage of surprise attacks to destroy a few magic crystal cannons. These magic crystal cannons were the same as the ones that Morse had brought over when Kellendil had encountered the undead. They just had different names. Although magic crystal cannons were expensive and rare and belonged to the country's resources, there were still a lot of reserves. A large number of magic crystal cannons were seized by Gravel and the others before they could be used. However, these Northland people didn't know how to use the magic crystal cannons. The Imperial soldiers who knew how to use them either died or fled. To the Northland people, the magic crystal cannons were scrap metal. However, the Imperial soldiers had adjusted their defenses, and their magic crystal cannons made Gravel suffer a lot. In a moment of desperation, Gravel could only order someone to pull the signal flare. This was something that Gravel and the others had obtained with great difficulty from the smugglers. Following 3 loud sounds, 3 streaks of red light shot into the sky. Horf knew that according to the agreement, this meant that Gravel and the others had succeeded. Their fleet could directly attack the large Imperial Navy warships. Bethman, who was in the city, also knew that they were going to meet up with Gravel and the others. Even the intelligence organizations hidden in the city took out their weapons and joined the chaotic battle. In fact, Gravel didn't succeed. He was just worried that if this continued, the troops on the warships would continuously attack Gravel and the others. With the magic crystal cannons, Gravel's army was likely to be wiped out. He had to get Horf and the others to join in. Only then would they have a chance of winning. Although this also meant that Horf and the others would be in greater danger, there was no other way. Horf's fleet quickly charged towards the large Imperial fleet according to the plan. The Imperial fleet was still connected, and they fired a volley of ballistae at Horf and the others. Many of the Dragon Chief's ships were destroyed, and more than half of the crew members were killed or injured. Many chose to jump into the sea, but they were still killed by the arrows. "What should we do, Father?" Ackerman said. "This is different from what we planned." Patrick said, "No matter what, we can only force our way through. Send those empty ships." Horf knew that if they had followed the plan, Gravel and the others would have already taken care of the warships, but that wasn't the case. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.